Yeah, come on today. It's all about the money. Welcome, welcome. Well, the money and the news, because I'm going to check that first. But yeah, we're trying something today. We're doing a little experiment. All right, let's see what happened while I was asleep. Hezbollah leveled. Florida leveled. Kamala hopefully leveled. Delegates walk out of UN General Assembly chamber. Oh, they walked out on Netanyahu? That's so childish. Like, how do you have a society where nobody can listen to any other person's speech? We talked about that the other day. Like, part of free speech is being able to listen to the speech. But I guess you're not guaranteed an audience, just the right to have speech. I wouldn't want every crazy conspirator kook to have guaranteed access to people listening to him. Although today they do. Hey, Austin. I know. What happened? Growing up, in fact, once a year, like they had a mini series that would come on TV all about the Holocaust, and it was just given that the Holocaust was bad, Israel was good. Like it was that black and white. So it surprises me this far into my life, the history. Um, it I think it's tall poppy. I think any kind of success and power turns people against you. That happened with the gays when we got marriage. It happened with gift. It happens with gifted people. Um, Israel, now that they're an established power, it's if you like rise above a certain collective level, you become a target or enemy because they're trying to bring everything down to the collective. Yeah, it just like that was such a historical fact that was that like nobody disputed that. Like the whole world was on the same page about that one thing, except for the evil people. I don't I don't know what that is, but you better not be a troll or you're on your way out of here. All right, let's see. We check the news here. Let me help you to the door, baby shark. So today we're gonna have. I'll put the link in a second. We're going to try something new. I'm going to have. In fact, I think I'm gonna not open the panel just yet. We're going to try a guest topic format. We've done it before. In fact, my other channel, kind of started that way. Um, but Joe is also he's a numbers guy. He's a money guy. He's trying to help me figure out ways to monetize this thing. Um, so we're gonna try a speaker topic format, and the idea is that he's gonna talk about investing stocks. It's particularly geared for people like me that's never invested, might be new to investing, not sure if they should even be investing, etc. And then we're going to use the super chat, so we're going to attempt to. If you have a question for Joe, you can send it in a super chat, and he can explain it because this is his system. Um, so this is an experiment, and if depending on how this goes, we have the potential to do regular topics and even maybe a membership tier where we deep dive. I have a guest on a topic, and we deep dive into that topic, and we do a panel and a question format. So some of this is just experimental for me to learn the all the different potentials to monetize because I really do want to make this a career. There's never been any job where I've been able to do the kind of work that I'm doing here. And I like that modern technology empowers people with that ability. And I want to show other people what's possible for them. especially other neurodivergent people that have a hard time making it in the traditional workforce. That's IG. You keep that agreement, please. This is all voluntary. It's like passing the basket at church. No pressure. You're still everyone's still able to benefit from the community regardless. You participate with your time. You participate by watching, liking, sharing with your friends, telling other people. You participate with your questions and dialogue with the panelists and each other. So the monetary participation is just an extra option for those that are able or want to, because it helps the community grow and what I'm trying to do here. Which is ultimately, I think, some kind of like community hub for men and neurodivergence that seems to be the biggest intersections. And also kind of politically, I guess, center right, although we do get all types here that seem to more or less be able to exist in harmony. So it's also a conversation space because I know in this day and age it's seems to be hard to have those kind of conversations. So hopefully this is one place where people can do that. And then I've talked about the hybrid model too, like eventually having regional chapters so that there's a in-person real life element to this too. And we could start merging the panelverse with reality and vice versa. If I wasn't in this little town and there were like more to do, I would do more like live out uh man on the street, deer on the street type of streams. Hey, Mike, and like let the people out there know about the panelverse. You oh, Kane, that's probably because of me, or if you've let Mike on your show. That's actually a good sign. I'm learning that the trolls are unavoidable, and so part of the skill set of being a YouTuber is knowing how to navigate this. It's like if you're going to be a wilderness guide or a hunter or anything out in nature, knowing how to deal with wildlife and bugs and pests and all the natural nuisances. This is kind of the wild. It's not. Yes, I'm trying to convert the world to Satanism. You caught me. This is the true Bohemian Grove. Y'all were worried about that decoy owl statue. This is where the Satanism is happening. Which, like it being the religion of self-empowerment, it's not surprising. If there were like some channel starting about charity and helping the poor and compassion, and they were a Christian and they said this is their way of bringing Christianity to the world, or this is their way of actualizing their Christianity, that would make sense to me. I would get that. So creating something that helps to empower other people and help them to find or increase their own autonomy and self-determination is a very satanic mission without everybody in it necessarily needing to be Satanist. Okay, everybody, welcome our guest for the morning, Mr. Accord slash
That's right.
Joe.
Maybe I should actually put a
Is that
serious
because you drive a Honda Accord, or are you like the guy that can bring consensus?
It has more to do with Stoic philosophy. The main tenet being living in accord with nature. So it's a reference to that kind of accord.
Like human nature?
All nature. So human nature is some of it.
How do you
And
live in harmony with things that want to kill you?
um, so one is that you recognize that death is an essential part of nature, and that we can't escape all of it. Right.
I'm
So
not in a rush to experience it though.
you know,
Like I can grant all that and
certain.
still like be concerned with things that want to kill me.
Um, and so you kind of just you need to figure out, is it your nature to um I think it's only because my beard has grown out that I seem ginger. My hair is blonde, but my beard is redder. Um, I'm not really sure if that's visible though,
That
but
works for you. Like gingers are a thing. I would play that up.
could be.
Embrace it.
Um, but yeah, part of the struggle is figuring out what one's place in nature is and living in accord with that. Right? Not everyone is exactly the same.
Well, which
Um,
which really means our place in human nature, because like our species at this level of civilization has pretty much figured out our collective place in nature. So it's figuring out our individual place within that human nature that's been created or emerged from us,
right. So
mostly.
you
Like
know,
we mostly
if
spend our day navigating each other, not lions and bears and stuff.
right, and our nature is, if we were to distinguish ourselves from other species. Oh, I don't have a website. Um, I may at some point, but at the moment I haven't seen cause to make one. Um, but I do have an X account. So if you look up Mr. Accord on
Here, I
X,
just had it up. I can drop it in.
yeah, and then I guess folks who would want to subscribe to me on Seeking Alpha could do so, but I doubt very many people here are paid subscribers to that. That's where I do most of my work is on Seeking Alpha, and I my detailed stock analyses are there. But part of the idea of today is that we're hoping it can be kind of more of an introductory thing for people who may not know anything about it. Um, Usually, people who are paying a subscription service for stock information already know a bit, and they're looking for a little bit more meat.
And yeah, and it explained like the question format and all that. But before that, you were talking about the like finding your place in nature. Hey, Chuck.
Yeah, so a finding place in nature is um, it's something that's everyone's own individual quest. I think one reason why I like Stoicism more than a lot of other belief systems is because it's not a belief system that gives you answers, even though that's what people want. It's a belief system that tells you the right questions to ask. It's very much a teach a man to fish rather than give him fish type of belief system. And one thing you can always we
Empowerment.
can most of, exactly most of us can go back to the fact that human beings are social animals, we're moral animals. That's built into our nature than other animals, right? um Lions and bears cannot begin to ask themselves moral questions, but we can. And so if we talk about, like, say for example, what do we do if how do we live in accord with nature if so much of it is trying to kill us, which could include other human beings? That part of the question is, like, is it in my nature to kill other folks, um, just so I can live? Like, to
And
what
there and
extent do
in
we
the
want to do
modern
that?
world, there's other versions of killing, like aggression, violence,
Right.
vandalism, property damage, cancel culture, relational aggression, social, reputational damage, etc.
And then even the context of violence itself, right? There's defensive violence versus aggressive violence. There's violence you can use to threaten people without killing them. There's, you can use it to just full on kill people. It's one thing to drive invaders out of your country. It's another thing to attack people so you can harvest their organs, right?
Yeah.
Either of these things can help you live, but, like, there's different moral consequences of each of those. And what humans have to do is, like, which one allows me to live in accord with my nature as a moral animal, right? I
So
think that's
ultimately, it's like reconciling your nature with the nature of other, like harmonizing or at least like navigating your nature
right.
through the nature of others. And because our natures are similar in some sense, we have a common base of experience to help do that. But then they're also different enough that we have all these little anomalies that we
Right. So,
encounter.
like, if we look at your um some of your background, Jeff, right? You've talked about how there was that incident where a female colleague at the it was the forget what it was. It was the group therapy um, workplace that you were at, and one of the female colleagues there saw your use of talking with your hands
Oh,
as
right. Yeah,
signaling
it was a
violence.
mental health
Right?
committee. And
It was a mental
it
health
was
committee. Okay,
yeah.
trying to remember the exact phrasing. And so if she were living in accord with nature, she would have known, like, for example, um, one, you're from Louisiana, so you said that's how you talk, and two, um, you're autistic, and so the way you use your hands is a big
But
part of
I don't think
how
any of that even
you live them.
matters. Like I think
You
people have
don't
the
think
right
it
to talk
matters.
with their hands without even have it without explaining it or justifying it.
Yeah, you don't think it matters, but if we're talking about living, some people will talk with their hands to communicate threats. There are people who do that. If she's living in accord with nature, however, she'll note, oh, especially given the line of work she's in, right? It's additionally disappointing that this did not occur to her. She would think, oh, this is just the way Jeff is, right? If I want to have a successful career where I work with people like Jeff, I need to understand and notice um, what it means when they do that, rather than project what I think it means. So my guess is that, especially because it seems like the workplace took her side on the issue.
Well, it was a
Um,
broken system because they had a charter that laid out very specific procedures on how to remove someone from a group if that ever became
mhm,
the case. And they completely ignored all of that. And the representative, like the county representative that was the official authority, was in the room and I had the charter with me and I pointed it out to her and she did nothing about it. So her role was to enforce the charter and she abdicated that. She just sat there and kind of flapped her hands. It's like I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do and she let them continue like making up the rules to vote me out. And so the system
right.
itself should have worked the minute I showed that lady the charter. She should have said, "No, guys, that's not how we remove someone from the group. It's this way."
Yeah, and I'm guessing probably that committee had problems after you left. Namely, that you mentioned how you
Oh,
were
they
sort
got
of a
disbanded.
well. There you go. So they lived out of accord with nature, and if they're
Right,
later
and
upset by
before that, they had an official person leading it, and she
Mhm.
stepped down. And in the interim, they were trying to find a replacement for her, but they were letting the group kind of run itself, and that's where it broke down because none of these people, they were all mental health clients. None of them had the organizational or leadership experience to run a group. So when you remove that component, it devolved into chaos because they wouldn't take my guidance because of the scary male talking with his hands thing. So I became an ineffective voice. But I was the
Right.
one trying to get it to stay on the track that that this lady had established for it.
Yeah. So my basic observation would be like if I were, let's say, in the shoes of those colleagues at some point, and they're thinking, "Ah, man, why did the committee disband? I wanted it to succeed and be better." They go back to like what they could control. You know, were they living in accord with the nature of that situation? And very clearly they weren't. And when you fight nature, um, you're not going to get results that you want. Nature is what is real. If you're fighting what is real, you always lose. Um,
Well, I have an example that shows
yeah.
up on here. There are people with interpersonal hostility, so their nature is
Mhm.
to fight and claw and scratch at each other. And they come on the panels and some of them are able to resist that and have a more civilized, constructive, pro social conversation. So to me, they're using like some kind of higher nature. Like if I said just live in harmony with your nature, we would all be we'd have a drama panel. Everybody would be fighting and
Mhm.
screaming with you. It would be blood sports. So some people are able to come and do something with their nature that allows the experience to be more elevated and offer something better than just like the id. And
Yeah.
so
Well, I mean,
part of it
so
is like when you say nature, it's I think there's different parts of our nature, different natures.
there's different layers to it, and so we are constantly having to assess like which ones are in play, right? So there's your individual nature, there's the nature of the group in which you're a part, right? There's the nature of this broader society at that moment in time, of which that group is a part. Then of course there are actual like scientific things, um, more about the physical world than social and interpersonal things. And to what extent those are a part of the decisions we have to make will vary from time to time, and so we have to be gauging, at what point certain things are in play. So your individual nature might not be as important in some contexts because it might be just something where the way you are unique as an individual doesn't matter much, right? Like,
That happens in
yeah,
like certain interpersonal dynamics like the drama triangle where you have the
mhm,
victim, the rescuer, the perpetrator, and it really doesn't matter the individual personalities involved. What's important is the
yes,
role you are on that triangle, and those roles can swap off because it's not a stable dynamic.
Exactly. Or another thing is like just think about people waiting in line in a grocery store. Um, Most people behave exactly the same way when they're waiting in line. They just stand there quietly and mind their own business, whatever their personality types are. Your individual nature isn't very important when you're waiting in line at a grocery store. Um, but you know, it could be in a different situation, right? Like on a date, during you know, sort of a workplace conflict, things like that. And then even like what you said about some of the drama stuff, where a narrative becomes important. But even then, your individual nature cannot matter because you could be put into a role, um, and the nature of the narrative could be more important than the nature of the individuals playing their roles.
I was going to do a topic today on
Um,
social roles, and then I remembered we had this stock thing, so I think I'm going to do it
yeah,
on my next stream. But it is it like nature? You're born with your innate set of natural tendencies, your temperament, and then there's a layer of social roles. Is that the socialization? Is the ability to fit that nature into certain roles, or be aware of the roles we play?
yeah. I mean, it's a very loose, adaptive, um, philosophical framework, Stoicism, because anything I say here, right? You go to maybe a more conservative or collectivist culture, um, you know, you're going to have to weigh things differently on any normal day to day. So, um, what I can talk about is like maybe like practically how it sort of aligns with um, how I got into stocks and investing because um, for me, you know, it's investing isn't just something like where it can make money, but it is something where I feel like I can have agency and control and integrity in what I do, without having to be in conflict with any, you know, nature in a grand sense. Um, and part of why I actually don't even feel it's really that risky is because I try to align, uh, basically do what I think is aligning my investing decisions, you know, with what is nature. And you have to have a certain method for doing that. Um, and a lot of what gets in, and I'll talk about, you know, going forward, probably not just today, but in the future, is, you know, the way our own psychology is a big part of investing. One of the first things people need to be able to rein in is their own potential to self-sabotage, when they're investing or managing their money. That is the main enemy. Isn't some like greedy Wall Street corruption type of thing, some sort of like big bank politician cabal. It's mostly what you yourself do with your own money when you get greedy at the wrong time and when you panic at the wrong time. Um, and some other things that are related to those. But those are like the main things. There is you have to really know, um, what your strengths are as an investor, and then um, making sure that your investment decisions align with what your strengths are. So when we were talking last night, I alluded this to a bit. Some people, you know, might know a lot about banks. Maybe they work at a bank. Maybe they're just they're educated with a financial background, and balance sheets and things like that
Nerds.
are easy for them to get. So if they were investing in banks, they could do very well with that. If they're investing in an oil company, it might not work as well for them. They just might not know when to call those shots accurately. Even Warren Buffett, as successful of an investor he is, and the fact that he's owned a little bit of like all kinds of industries throughout his career, he's had better averages with certain things. So banks and insurance, he does much better with those. Pretty much all of those have been wins for him. And there are some businesses that um, he's done well, and he's um, not done well. So a good example of one of his more recent big blunders was Kraft Heinz. He took position in that in about 2015, I think, and it just hasn't been good for him. But that wasn't quite as where he was strong. And this Nat decided to show up. That's nice. Um,
Yeah, I was
and
wondering if you had bugs or something.
No, I'm just talking with my hand too, you know. So,
Like
but I am signaling aggression to this Nat, though, right? So, if your
you're not
colleague, you know,
flapping.
wants us, Yeah, if your colleague wants to say that she feels unsafe, I'm actually not going to hold it
Well,
against her this time if she's watching.
I always thought women appreciate a man that can kill the bug for them. So I don't know why all of a sudden it's taken as violence.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I need to be more precise about it. It's clearly, I don't think it's going away. Instead of trying to scare it away, I need to go for a kill and do that. Yeah, you make the
Or
prayer
just
symbol
be
when you kill the
stoic.
bug. Yeah, it's like, oh yes, I'll let the bug bite me. I'm in accord with nature. What is a bug bite, right? A bug bite's only a problem if I let it bother me, right? If I
Exactly.
were a true sage, I'd be saying that. Um, where were we about the? Oh yeah, so um, that's
Like your
those are the
strengths.
yeah, those are the things that like can help with the psychology of investing. And really, before people start making investments, they really need to figure out like where they want to start, what their circle of competence is. So investments that they are more disposed to understand well. They basically want to spend some time doing homework before they get involved, and also making sure they have the financial means to do that. So uh, a lot of folks look at stocks as like a trading thing, right? Which is not what I do really. I do a little bit of trading situationally, but the bulk of what I do is long-term investing, where it's not I'm trying to get in and out in a day or in that week. The bulk of what I do is I just sit on it and I wait for the result that I'm expecting to come. And um, at best, I collect dividends in the meantime if it's an investment that pays dividends, which some do, some don't.
What's a
Um,
dividend for the viewers that are brand new?
so a dividend, I mean, we've probably all heard the phrase paying dividends before. A dividends are a share of the profits that are paid to owners of the stock. So, a typical C corporation and similar entities that have shares but aren't technically stocks, um, but are still publicly traded. The ownership of the whole business is split into these stocks. So if you start your own business, like if you start a hot dog stand, you have 100% of it. If you decide to take your hot dog stand public, then you would take your 100% ownership and then you would split it into a bunch of stocks. You'd keep some for yourself normally, and then you would sell the rest of the stocks on the open market, and then whoever buys when you go public is now it's effectively a business partner with you. And then really what makes the value of a stock what determines that the, is either how much in dividends it pays or it could pay at some point, because a business is a cash generating asset. And so some go ahead and pay most of their earnings out as dividends right now. Some don't. Some are constantly reinvesting in the business. And then some don't pay dividends because they're not profitable. So there's that too. Um, but basically, that's what it is. It's if businesses could not distribute cash to their shareholders through dividends, then they would have no value, because otherwise, why would you pay cash to own a part of a business that can never pay you any kind of cash, right?
So you're
Um,
looking for companies that consistently pay dividends?
that's one thing you can do. If they're growing, they might be reinvesting all their cash for right now, and it may be some years before they pay dividends. But when they get to the point that they can pay dividends, it could be 50 times as much in dividends what they could have paid
Billions of
when you
dollars.
first. Right? It's like when you think about a small tech startup that goes to becoming something like Google, right? If Google had started paying dividends in its first years, um, it would not have gotten as big as it did. It had to constantly be reinvesting. I still think they don't pay dividends because they're still growing, but um, since the
Still
financial
growing.
potential of the business,
They just got monopoly
yeah,
sued, and they're still
yeah.
growing.
Well, they make acquisitions. They're adding segments to their business, right? The search engine is their core segment,
Yeah.
and then they add little things to it over time, right? Like for a while there was no Gmail or Google Docs or things like
Are you?
that.
Then
They
they
did they
took
didn't own
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, they acquired that, so they've been adding things to it, and they also it's more common in tech companies for them to buy back their shares rather than pay a dividend.
Oh, like we don't
That-
need these
that's-
anymore. We'll take these back.
yeah, it's kind of like if you think of it as like if you had a non-public company. Let's say instead of a sole proprietorship, which is sort of like what you do. You also have an LLC, so there's that.
Yeah, it's
But
a LLC.
you um
It's a single owner LLC. They make a
yeah,
distinction
single owner.
here.
So
I can't hire employees.
imagine you had business partners, whether it's through an LLC or not. If you really like the future of your business with your partners, you could offer to buy some of their ownership from them, and they could agree to sell it to you. And that's very similar to a stock buyback. Um, if you hold your
And so
stock in
I
the
would own
company,
more of the partnership than them
right?
if
So
I did that.
if you buy their share out, you're going to give them a check, but then you have more equity in your partnership. And a stock buyback accomplishes the same thing. When the company buys back shares, essentially they are buying back and canceling shares from your other business partners that are the other shareholders. So if you just hold your position, even if you're not doing the buyback yourself, the company is doing it for you through the capital
Oh, thank
allocation.
you, Kane, very much. Good to have you as a member.
Okay, cool.
Yes, very.
And so that's like a fad in tech right now. I actually think it's kind of dangerous. I think it's part of what's contributing to this big tech bubble we're looking at. It's not just AI driven, but it's also very buyback driven because the more a stock is being bought, the more its price gets driven
Because
up
then they're
too.
less accountable to people outside of themselves.
Um, no, it's just a simple supply and demand thing, right? If you put more buy orders than sell orders into a market for stock, you're going to drive the price up, right? More people are going to want to buy it, so
Oh.
they have to pay a higher price in order to they have to put in an order for a higher price in order to get ahead of the other buyers,
So it's
and then
making it
someone has to.
harder for people to participate in the tech stocks.
Well, not really, because you can. I'll get into how this is sort of like the determining the risk and reward long term with stock investing. Is if you have, let's say, $10,000 in savings set aside that you're ready to start investing, you can
Is
still
that
put
is
10,000.
that the amount you'd start with? Like how does someone know when to start investing?
I
And
think
who should be investing?
10,000 is a number that if a lot of people were starting, they probably have that much if they're just
And
starting. That's
that's
just
10,000 set aside just to play with. Like it's not coming out of anything else. It's strictly to invest. You have enough free cash that you have 10,000 to start investing. That's the point you
yeah.
should
Well,
start.
I wouldn't say play with just because normally when people say that they're talking about day trading, and like just saying like fuck it, let's see what happens. And this is more about you're putting it into something and you're going to let it compound over time.
So like
Um,
instead of putting it in a savings account, you would
yeah. So the
put it
idea
in
is that
invest.
when you put it in stocks, um, you're it's like putting in a savings account, but your average yield, your average return over time will be higher than what you get in a savings account because right now a high yield savings account or a money market is going to give you about 4 to 5% in interest. Um, and technically interest is taxable. We'll ignore the taxable portion for now just because it's a little bit of it. But let's just say it's non-taxable. You have a way to do it so you're not taxed by it. You could do some money markets at a brokerage without tax impact if you use the right account. But um, that's right now. Typically, uh, the interest rate on a cash position is just enough to keep up with the rate of inflation. So in the long term, it's not going to be 4 or 5%. It'll probably be more like 2 to 3%. Um, and the average of the market um, over the long run is usually about 10%. So if
Oh.
someone were to um, take their extra savings and put it into a stock market index their whole life over the course of their
What's an
saving and
index?
investing. An index is this automated, it's basically like an automated list of stocks that sort of defines what will be included in it and then automatically rebalances every quarter or every year. There are different indexes. So, what is each index can vary, but they're basically supposed to take the stock picking out of it and they're sort of identifying a certain category of stocks, and the index is usually designed to try and filter for those.
So
So,
you can invest in an index, not necessarily the specific stocks, but
right.
an
So the
index so
index
that you
would
get that cluster of stocks.
right. So the index is
Oh.
basically saying, here's what our portfolio will be. and here's how it will change over time. So the S&P 500, for example, is an index that existed before there were actually funds for it. Um, so index funds are pretty common today, but the indexes existed before they were actually used to form fund portfolios. And um, the S&P 500, in layman's terms, are the 500 most expensive companies on the market. And by that I mean the price of all their shares is higher than other companies. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you get a bad price for them, um, but they have the highest market caps. The market cap is the share price times the number of shares. Um, so you would have to be the richest people in the world to completely buy out an S&P 500 company, especially on the upper end of the list. And so that automatically rebalances itself based on how market caps change over time. Some companies fall out of the index because their market caps go down, or because other companies have their market caps grow that weren't in the index before. And so basically, the S&P 500 is considered a large cap U.S. stock index because it's pretty much just American companies. Uh, Even though some of them have pretty extensive international business operations, they're headquartered here in the U.S. Their main operations are here.
This already
Um,
makes me want to buy stock just for the patriotism.
yeah, and then
Let's
there are
say
other
I
companies
have
that do
okay,
that.
I've saved up 10,000. I have my first
Mhm.
10,000 saved up, and I'm ready to invest. What do I do?
Um, well, first I would say make sure you know what stocks you want to put in it. If you don't know that yet, probably put it in something that gets you better yield than your checking account. So a high yield
And a
savings account
professional would
or a
be
money
able to help
market.
me decide this, like a broker or something, a financial advisor, or somebody like you.
They could, but a lot of professionals are not going to do stock picking much. They're usually going to lean towards something called modern portfolio theory, and they would probably um, try to split your investment into um, maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 funds, whether they're index funds or not. Um, and and they might not just be stock funds. Some of them might be bond funds. They'll ask you things like, what is your risk tolerance? Um, Most financial investors, when they talk about risk, they're using it in a very loaded way. They're talking about it just as volatility. So when you see a stock price go up and down a lot, like really fast in a short period of time, that is volatility. The stocks that are more like this are not considered volatile. And so most financial professionals will say the non-volatile stocks are less risky. Um, and then others will say the volatile ones are risky. I don't look at it that way. That is not risk to me. Um, Risk is either the permanent loss of capital or getting unsatisfactory returns over time. And the long-term consequences are what determine those, right? Volatility is only risky if you're doing something in the short term. This is why you should not have money invested in the stock market that you will need. You should have a cash position of like emergency funds, whatever money you need on hand to put out fires that may come up so you can respond to that, because you don't want to have to dip into your stock portfolio for an emergency after your stocks have gone down a bit, right? Then you're just locking in your loss. You never get it back, right? So you should only be investing money that you do not intend to spend for a very long period of time. And the idea is to let it grow so that you are immune to the temptations of volatility. If you are not immune to the temptations of volatility, um, you should not be in the stock market. It just doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. That's just how it is. Um, and um, but financial professionals will do that in large part because um, they know that most people don't understand that, and if they know that their customers will look at their balance, like they sign into their account, they look online and they see that it's down 20%, that they'll panic and pull their money out. So really, the risk tolerance thing is more for the professional than the actual client, because they will simply put you into assets that have less volatility so that you're less likely to just scare yourself into pulling your money out. Less
But you can
volatile
tell
assets.
them, like, I want, like, risk volatility doesn't bother me. Like, don't be afraid to put me in
Yeah,
stocks.
yeah, they'll ask you like on a scale of 1 to 10, um, what your tolerance is. Usually 1 being the least tolerant, 10 being the most tolerant, often considered aggressive.
What is yours? What would you
And
tell them?
it'd be a 10. It'd be a 10.
Okay.
There's no reason to be scared of volatility if you're trying to save and grow for a long term. Even if you're just doing indexes and not picking individual stocks, um, um, that would be the case. And so, good apps for the stock market. I mean, I mostly just sign in on my browser. So I do my investing through Fidelity. And so I also have an app for that. I don't know if it's the best app, but I think what you really want is a broker who can provide good service. Like if there are issues with your money, you want to be able to call somebody and get a hold of someone easily who can quickly move on what the issue is. Because sometimes just things can happen. There could be errors or whatever. Um, so I think the quality of the broker who's like going to be the custodian of your assets um, is more important than the quality of their app. I mean, realistically, like most of your investing should not be pulling out a phone and just kind of casually like just moving around tens of thousands of dollars. So I usually do my transactions directly from my laptop. Um, um, but yeah, I was saying most 10, most aggressive as they call it, and I really hate that phrasing because it's loaded. They're making it seem like you're being foolish by putting most of your money in stocks, even though stocks are the best returning assets in the long run in the history of capitalism.
So now
It's
that's
better
seen
than
as
just
aggression.
they just call it aggression because of the volatility, and they know that customers will get scared and pull their money out, and then the professional has no business. So that's just
That
all it
makes me
is.
want to
It's
invest even more. I want to go in there and be as aggressive as I can.
right now. Some of the risk too, though, is that I'll explain more about why there's other aspects of risk, and we'll talk about it more in the concept of permanent capital loss. That's the first thing. Before you worry about getting weak returns, that's like the secondary risk. The primary risk is just losing money because once you lose it, you're out. You can't. Oh, I'll just um, you have no capital, right? You can't grow a zero. Um, so you're basically done at that point until you find a way to make more money. And on the other hand, though, if you're right, you could get multiples of what you put in, and then you don't want to lose that. And what happens to folks is some people will make quite a bit of money, and then they're like, "Oh, I can grow it 10 times again," and you don't necessarily know that, and then they lose everything they made. I knew a guy who made like 5 or 6x on a COVID stock. So it was a stock that went up a lot during COVID because they were getting a lot of business during the pandemic. And um, there are two reasons they didn't sell and lock in their profit was one, they wanted to wait for long-term capital gains tax instead of short-term because it would be a lower tax rate. And two, they thought it would go up more. And they really had no reason to think they would go up more. When they finally did sold, they sold at a 2x return about a year later rather than 5 or 6x. And let me tell you that the 5 or 6x, even with short-term capital gains tax, is way more money made than 2x paid at a long-term capital gains rate. People have this really crazy aversion to taxes in investing that I have noticed everyone has it. It's like people will give up huge amounts of money if it means waiting for the long-term capital gains rate. It is crazy to me. People really have this visceral hatred of taxes that cost them a
Yeah,
lot of money.
I've seen
Um,
that.
so that's why I don't talk about taxes much with investing. I don't want to put it in people's heads that they really need to proactively avoid taxes because I have seen far more people shoot themselves in the
Uh-oh.
foot just because they hate Uncle Sam. It's stupid. Um, and anyway, um, um, it also helps you get the heads up on DOJ investigation and dump all your Visa stock. Well, if you get a heads up on something that the public doesn't know, that would be considered insider trading, and you could go to prison for that. So just make sure it's not insider trading. Or what you can do is you can whistleblow it. You can say, "Hey, I just found out that Visa is going to get investigated by the DOJ." Publish it somewhere that it's likely to be seen. Give yourself an hour, and then sell. And then you can say, "Well, I disclosed it to the public. I gave up my insider information, so it was fair." Some people do that. Some people will go on CNBC and say, "Hey, I just learned this, and this stock is fucked, and I'm gonna be selling pretty soon. Um,
And
and
so that
that's
makes it
happened
not
before.
insider if they
Right.
give
You can go
advance
on
warning.
CNBC and tell people what's going on. Like that's like most of the investing public right there. They're watching CNBC is like one of their main news sources.
Because then you don't have
Um,
an advantage. You're giving everybody the option to do the same thing.
right. But let me go back to the what like risk is and capital loss and sort of there's three basic investment types. There's there's cash, there's bonds, and there's equity.
What was
Um,
the third?
equity.
Equity.
Um, so equity is stocks. Equity means ownership, right? And so it's not the other type of equity we usually hear on this stream. It's but it's
It's the
equity
good
like
kind.
so like the ownership you have in your LLC, Jeff, that's equity. You have 100% equity in the business, and then if you were to sell um, half of your ownership to someone to bring on a partner, you would then have 50% equity in it. So equity can be private, like in an LLC, or it can be public, like through a stock. But it's business ownership. And then bonds are debts, so it could be bonds or any type of debt, but we'll just say bonds as shorthand. And then there's cash, and what you get from cash or short term. There are some things that are effectively cash, even if they're not. It's just the short term interest rates. So bonds and cash both pay interest. Bonds tend to pay higher interest because they take longer to mature and there's a bit more risk with them. Cash tends to have less risk because your deposits are FDIC insured. Um, and they tend to be used to, they have a lot more flexible financing. So um, like a cash equivalent, like a money market, those are actually invested in what are really short-term bonds. And those are bonds that come due in like a less than a year, sometimes a month. And so you get your cash back very quickly with those. So that's why they're considered not very risky. Um, like money markets are are like the most stable. Money markets and similar types of cash positions are like the most stable forms of investing. So even though I kind of say sometimes you shouldn't invest money unless you have a cash cushion. In a manner of speaking, cash is still a form of investing because at the very least you're getting interest, right? That's sort of the baseline for judging what you're getting. Um, Bonds are actually most of the investing market. Most of the capital invested in the world is in bonds and not stocks. Um, but it's also mostly big institutions and very wealthy people that are in bonds. Not as many individuals are in bonds unless they buy like a fixed income ETF, which would be
So
similar
that's
to
not
like a
something like a starting person would have to worry about initially.
no. And
Bonds.
I'm very anti bond. I don't think bonds give enough return to be attractive. One
Okay.
reason though why bonds are considered lower risk than stocks is that bondholders have priority in the event of a bankruptcy. So if a company goes bankrupt and they have to liquidate all of their assets, first they have to repay bondholders because that's a form of debt, and then the stock holders get whatever's left after that. So you have priority in the event of liquidation, also in the earnings. So before, so a company can't pay dividends to its shareholders if they're not paying the interest on their bonds first. They have to pay the interest on their bonds. So you have priority in the interest and the principal with bonds. That's why they're considered less risky. But their interest rates are often like 5 or 6%, and they're not very great. And then usually, if a company is doomed, they're not going to pay back all the principal on the bond anyway. So there's not a lot of advantage. Another thing too is that bonds tend to people tend to be more certain about what the value of a bond is because it tells you on the bond what it's worth. It says this is the principal, this is the interest, so you know how much money you will get out of the bond. Whereas stocks are more volatile because the actual total earnings of the business after they're paying off all of their expenses, like bond interest, is more of a question mark, right? You don't know how successful a business could be, so their earnings could be modest. They could go to the moon, and price changes on the stock market often change the expectations people have about the earnings. And so um, bonds tend to have stabler prices, which is why if you tell a financial professional, oh, I have like low risk tolerance, they'll mostly put you in bonds because bonds prices don't move as much because people are changing their minds about bonds less often because the bonds come out and tell you this is what you will earn if you buy the bond. So there's a lot less.
So all you have to do is wait
volatility.
for it to come to
Yeah, you
maturity.
wait for it to come due, and then what a lot of bond investors do at that point is they just reinvest the principal once they get it back, and they just put it into another set of bonds. Whereas with a stock, um, there's not really principal due. Um, Really, the closest thing to principal due is when you decide to sell the stock, because with bonds, they tend to sell at a price that's close to the value of their principal, called par. So usually bonds are issued where one bond's par is $1,000. So most bonds will trade on the market somewhere close to $1,000. So they might be, at $980. They might be at 1,020. That the actual difference between par will depend on interest rates and how they fluctuate. They're usually trading very close to par. If a bond is trading at like $600, the market is concerned about that bond. They may actually believe that the principal won't be repaid or something. So um, there are things like that going on usually. Um, but most bonds, that's not the case. And well, I said 600. I meant six. But yeah, 600. That's right. Not 60% basically. Um, and so, but a stock, you basically get the in theory the cash flow of the earnings until the end of time, right? So there's no end to it, and they can grow. A bond really can't grow its interest unless it's got like a floating rate interest thing on it, and even then, that's kind of limited because it's going to depend on how much interest rates get hiked up. And most bonds um, don't tend to do that. Most bonds tend to have fixed interest. And so they're not very good investments. I would say if you want to some people do bonds because they want to balance between um, a higher rate of return than cash, but stability. But bonds overcomplicate that, if you ask me.
Well,
Just default,
let's focus on
yeah,
stocks then,
yeah,
and just leave the bonds alone
yeah.
for
But
now.
I'm just letting folks know like that you'll hear a lot about bonds. This is why they're important. So um, really the dichotomy is between cash and stocks, and figure out how much you need to have in cash, how much you really can't stand to lose, even if it's money that you don't need. If your available cash dropping below a certain amount will give you nightmares just because you're a paranoid person. So maybe you only need like 15,000 of emergency funds in cash, but emotionally you cannot tolerate less than 30,000. Put it in 30,000, right? And then put any cash you have over 30,000 into the market, right? So just sort of depends on what you know is likely to make you self sabotage. Once you have enough cash that you'll have enough, even if the market crashes, um, and you won't panic, that's the time to be in stocks. In the meantime, like if you aren't sure which stocks to pick, I would just say keep putting more in cash. Um, Sean Kelly asked, are bonds government stocks? So bonds can be issued by the government and by individual companies. The government tends to have lower interest because they're more likely to repay their principal. So they have higher credit quality. Usually, the higher the credit quality of the bond issuer, the lower the interest they basically get to demand from the market. If a bond has really high interest, that's usually because the business has a reputation of poor credit quality. So there are some bonds that will pay like 10% interest, and 10% is the average return of the market over time. So you could get a market-like return through some of the bonds out there, but then you have to wonder, why is this entity giving a 10% bond? Is it because they suck? Um, so that's one thing. But I would think, if you're at that point where you're doing that level of due diligence about a business's ability to repay a bond, why not just do that for stocks? Because you're much more likely to find ones that give higher returns over time than even a 10% bond, as well as ones that are underpriced on the market because the market has changed its mind favorably for you. So it's just as soon as you can find opportunities in the bond market, you basically already made an argument for yourself that you should just be looking for stocks. Um, and bonds are just it's 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 something for investors of a certain psychology who have just decided they are not going to do stocks because um, their parents or grandparents lived during 1929 and they told them stocks are evil. And That's really what it comes down to. Yeah, there are no government stocks. You cannot have equity ownership of the government. That's what the voters basically are. The citizens are the equity holders of the government. At least in a democracy, they are. Um, I guess if you're in a dictatorship, that's much more like a single person LLC. Um, but um, yeah, so with that, when you look at any business, there's two ways to value it. Um, and this helps you determine whether or not you want to buy the stock because the price for the stock is going to be, relative to the entire market cap, and the market cap is going to be whether that's a wise market cap will depend on the financial realities of the business. The two main ways are the balance sheet and the earnings. Earnings is much more important these days than balance sheet. Um, Several decades ago, the balance sheet could be pretty useful because you had a lot of companies that would just liquidate and then you know give a final cash distribution after they sold off their assets and paid off their liabilities. And if the stock was trading at like half of liquidation value, you could double your money doing that. It is less often the case that companies liquidate now. Usually, if companies go out of business, they um, don't have any money left over to give out, or the case is that businesses keep growing. They don't say, "Oh, we had a good time to close shop and liquidate." They keep going, they keep growing, they acquire, they expand. So growth is a bigger part of investing these days than um, in decades past. Um, but the balance sheet still can be helpful sometimes in determining what a floor of value is. So sometimes you'll find businesses that are trading, that are profitable businesses, and they're trading at a market cap that is equal to their net cash position. Net cash would be how much cash they currently have minus um, the value of the debt on their liabilities. So um, if you can basically have a liquidation value at that moment plus the earnings that the business makes. Um, so those are the two basic things. It's the balance sheet, assets minus liabilities, or earnings. And so earnings are tricky, of course, because you have to think about the future. It's not like a bond where the interest payment is going to be like we will pay this amount in interest. It's going to be depending on the financial results of that year. So you have to look at the business, sort of figure out what type of earnings does it usually make, what kind of good or service does it offer, or mixture of goods and services does it offer, and what sorts of things will impact the earnings from those goods and services positively or negatively. How likely do I think these things are, and then so what kind of earnings estimates do I want to make based on that? Once you figure that out with at least a few stocks, you feel like you have a handle on that. Um, then it makes sense to actually start stock picking and putting your money into that. No, I think that's just Jeff's face, right?
Not Laza's not very good at interpreting me or reading my body
Yeah,
language, much like other people, especially all the way up there from Canada.
yeah. Having said that, I kind of just did sort of lay down a few paragraphs at least of what a good starting
Yeah,
point is. I
I'm
want to
trying to
know what
break
your.
it down for like the newbies like me that are
Mhm.
like we have our first 10,000. We've acquired the cash, the capital part, and now we're ready for the stock phase. And so,
Mhm.
what do we do with our? Where do we take it? Who do we talk to? How do we? Where do you look? Where do you find the stocks to even look at them?
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I would say is even if you're not ready to buy stocks, but you want to like build up money, go ahead and form a brokerage account. So again, there's a lot of different ones. I use Fidelity. If other people wanted to copy that, I think Fidelity has good service in terms of like if something goes wrong, if there's an error with an account and being able to fix it. So that's way more important with things like that. It's just Robinhood is a popular app for like younger folks who like want to gamble and they want to like be able to day trade easily. But I'm not talking about that, right? So
So the apps
the,
matter. Like they're not just like it doesn't matter which one you choose. They all do the same thing. They do very
okay,
specific things.
Yeah, it's just Robinhood is formatted in a way that it's kind of easy to use, but Robinhood also actively tries to like bait you into trading because they make money off of trades. They make it off of order volume. Actually, the method by which most brokerages make their money from trades was invented by Bernie Madoff. You remember him?
Yeah, I do remember
Yeah.
him.
So they do is they sell order flow, and essentially order flow is the broker gets a piece. There's no commissions in most trading now. There used to be. Um, but over the last 15 years or so, it's gotten to the point where most brokers do not charge um, commissions. But the way they make money is um, when they are dealing out the orders, when there's such a large volume of them, um, what they will often do is be the counterparty to your trade and then quickly match it with somebody else, and they will take like a very narrow spread of that trade, and it could be like a penny. But if it's for volume of millions of shares, they're making lots of money on that. And Bernie Madoff actually developed that. So for them, the incentive is to make sure lots of trading happens. And so Robinhood has made it very easy to trade. They're not interested in advisory relationships and buy and hold mentalities. Because if you buy and hold, you're not doing a lot of trades. You'll probably only do a handful of trades in a year. Right. So like a whole year, you might only do a handful, like enough to count on one hand. Um, you're not necessarily supposed to be trading a lot. The only way you might be doing more trades is if you're regularly taking part of your paycheck and putting it directly into your brokerage account as it comes in, like assuming that um, you're at a point where you're constantly buying stocks. But anyway, point made. It's more like the kinds of services. Like, if something is wrong, can you call someone, get someone on the phone, probably in 10 to 15 minutes, talk to them about the problem, and then at least you can get a process started to fix it. You want a competent broker for that. So I know Fidelity is good for that. I worked at Fidelity for a year um, as an advisory representative, and I had to deal with stuff like that, and they have a good system. Um, so you could also maybe do Vanguard or Charles Schwab. I think those are some of the more
Yeah,
dependable
they're
ones.
they're noticing the.
Yeah. Well, it's
Well,
just
this is a Spurg channel, so that's gonna happen.
yeah,
I don't.
it is. But I'm
Because
also really
my
trying to
mind,
emphasize like
I can tell you my process while I'm listening to it is yes, it's not targeted in the direction I'm trying to take, but at the same time, it's useful and good information. So how much do I keep it going, and how
well,
much do
but
I
the reason I'm
refocus
bringing
it
it
on the
up
thing?
is because if you go for a broker that has a very fancy interfaces that has like these big buttons, buy and sell, and then they try to gamify I make 10 trades in one day and you win like 5 stars, right? I mean, Robinhood is like doing shit to entice you to trade more,
See,
to
I'm
just entice
already
you.
lost and discouraged
Yeah.
for even trying to set up a broker account because it already seems way too complicated. I just want to
Well,
pull up a
it's
website and like you sign up for an email address, you just pull up Google, you sign up for
it's
an
really
email,
it's
and then you have an
yeah,
email address. I
it's
want
not
it to
hard
be
to
that simple.
it's not that hard to make a normal brokerage account. It's just um I'm just drilling down the point that a fancy looking web page or app isn't necessarily good. It could in
What
fact
do we
be
look for? What are the things to?
well, go ahead and you know what, just pull up Fidelity right now, and it will show you there. It's very simple. And if other folks want to pull up Fidelity, they can.
Here, I will screen share it.
If you want to be a rebel and pull up Charles Schwab or Vanguard in the chat, do that as well. I imagine they have the same buttons more or less to press to set up an account. And for most folks, I think it's going to be like just a standard brokerage account. I think Fidelity has like a bunch of orange buttons. So
Open an account,
yeah, yeah, click that. And then scroll down, retirement IRAs.
brokerage
So
account.
yeah, now folks who specifically want to put some of their savings toward a retirement account, they could open an IRA. So that's a possibility as well. And IRAs are tax sheltered. So if you have capital gains in an IRA or dividends or interest, none of that is taxed while it's in the IRA. So that's why some people do that, because if they can avoid the taxes or defer the taxes, they can increase the rate of compounding. But that means you're also waiting until retirement before you get the money. So brokerage account, you will pay taxes based on net positive transactions that occur. Um, but you also don't have limitations on when you can take the money out. Also,
So
you
most
can
most accounts are going to look something like this. You'll just sign up, fill
yeah,
in your information,
fill it
etc.
out,
Okay.
and then when you set it up, you'll connect it to a bank account so that if you want to transfer funds to put into the brokerage account, you can do that. When you open a brokerage account, at least most of them, your cash will automatically be put into a money market position, because that's basically like having it in cash.
What's a
Um,
money market?
so money markets are actually funds. So they are short-term bond funds technically. And um, it's very similar to what banks do with the deposits you make in your checking account, right? They lend it out. And so basically, um, the cash you put into a money market position, the money market fund, uses that to buy short-term bonds, sometimes from the federal government, sometimes from um, corporations, sometimes from a mixture. There's different money market funds, but you're basically getting whatever is the short-term interest rates that are prevailing in the market at that time. So currently, they're like 4 to 5%. So most money markets will give you 4 to 5% annualized. That
So
changes
you
very
you
quick.
open the
Yeah,
account, you put a certain amount of money in, and that money goes initially to this money
right.
market thing
And
and gets
if you
this
don't
little
do
bit of
anything,
interest, and then from there you invest it in actual stocks.
yeah. So that's what's called your core position. And it will sit there until you do anything with it and just earn interest every month. And the interest you earn immediately goes into more shares of the money market that yield more interest. And
Okay.
so money markets are like a high yield savings account um, in many ways. They usually have about the same interest rate as a high yield savings account would be. Um, and they're a place to get better interest than your checking account while you figure out where you want to invest your money. So, um,
So
and
even
this
if
would
you're
be
not
raises,
ready to invest, you could open a brokerage and use it for that, like
yes,
as a like
yes,
similar to a
and
savings.
it's similar to a high yield savings account. I mean, you might as well have it open then, because there's not really any downside to it.
Okay.
Um, and like money markets cash, it's FDIC insured.
Well,
So
Mr.
that
B, that's
basically,
why we have Joe here. That's what this is
yeah.
for. So
But yeah, so the money
it's the
market is
new
FDIC
age.
insured. So your deposit up to $250,000 will be insured by the FDIC. So it's a pretty safe way to save your money and get good interest while you figure out where you want to put money in the stock market. Um, and so someone who has 10,000 right now, or um, whatever is the amount that they have, but they know they have enough cash set aside. Um, um, Whether it's in the money market itself or in their bank, they can start doing that and slowly build up their the cash they want to have ready to invest until they decide where to do that. So some people could have $100,000 in cash right now, but they don't know how they want to invest it, and so
Right.
they could just open a brokerage and put that in a money market, study some things up, and then maybe they get up to 150,000 in cash before they actually pick stocks, right? They definitely should not be rushing to do this. Um, and so that's what folks can do in the meantime. And then, of course, they can familiarize themselves with the features of the broker, kind of just see where everything is. You can open a brokerage account and an IRA if you want. There's nothing says you
And
can't do
IRA is
both.
the same way. There's like websites that you can open IRA accounts on, or you can do it
Yeah,
through
you can do it
Fidelity.
on Fidelity. You can do it on
Same. Okay,
Fidelity,
same site.
and
Just
then when you
so you'd
sign
open
in,
two different types of accounts with the same
right,
company.
you
Okay.
just have to clarify that's what you're doing. And also, like, you could even call into Fidelity and they could set up an account for you online. They'd probably
Oh,
send you
okay.
like email you some things but like you can call someone and they can hold your hand through this, and it will not cost you anything for them to do that.
I set up my
Um,
banking account through video, through like a Zoom call
yeah,
with the bank, and they walk me through the whole process.
yeah. I think at most they would email you some things that you would just have to like
Yeah, they
click
do, and then you
yourself.
do it
But
right there live with them, and then they go on to the next
yeah,
step after you do that.
and that's a really good thing about Fidelity is like the account management stuff. Like when I say account management, I mean like um the the nitty gritty of it, like they will help you over the phone for that, and they will not charge you anything for it. Where they make money is on they make money on the trades too, but they also have an advisory business, and so their hope is that if they provide you a lot of good service, you'll consider using them as your advisor, and then they can get money management fees from what you put with them. So there's that too. Um,
I think this is good information, and as somebody that knows nothing about this, I'm learning a lot.
yeah,
But I think some of them are ready for the drama.
some of them are ready for the drama. Okay,
Yeah, we
well
are
that's
coming up
fine.
at an hour though, and I do have to take a little bio break. I might let you address the audience for a minute or so, but then you also are gonna take questions or maybe callers or an open panel. So like, whatever you want to do there,
Yeah, let's.
I
I
can.
think we established a lot of good basic stuff for folks to
Because
consider,
the next
especially
thing
within an
is
hour.
learning how to like what to look for the different companies to evaluate what stocks you want to invest in.
Right. And I would, yeah, I would almost say like maybe looking at specific stock. I mean, if folks want to like ask about specific stocks, we can do that. But we always have plenty of future streams to go over that, and it might be good for people just to open like a brokerage account, get a feel for that, see what it's like, actually know what it looks like, so that you. It's much easier to decide what you want to do if you um can already picture in your head where you're going to need to click for something. Like if I need to make a transaction, if I see an opportunity in the market, I already know in my head I need to go into Fidelity and click this and do that. I might need to pull this out of my bank to get a little extra cash. I already know the pathways I'm going to take to make a transaction happen. And if you don't know what that pathway is in your head, it's a lot harder to plan for it or respond to things that opportunities that you see. Um, and so yeah, a lot of folks, if they haven't done it already, might want to consider opening a brokerage account. If you have a 401k with an employer, rather often the business or firm that runs your 401k also has individual brokerage services. And you could open a brokerage account with them as well and have it all in the same place so that when you sign in to the same account you use to check your 401k, now you will see your brokerage account. And you might actually find that easier, especially if you want to roll over your 401k at one point. You might be able to roll it over into an IRA with that broker. That's a useful thing to do. Um, whether or not that's desirable kind of depends on the perks of your 401k. Every employer has different perks with their 401k plan. Each 401k plan is like it's almost like an individual. It's like they have their own personalities even in terms of what they let you do or don't let you do. Um, but that it's just good to have that on the table. And then I'm gonna let Jeff get back, but that's one thing I would think is just open a brokerage account. If you have extra cash that you want to put in there, even if it's cash that you don't plan to invest, but it's part of your savings and you just want a better interest rate than what you have in your bank, that might not be bad. Just keep in mind that it can be 1 to 3 business days if you need to move money between the bank and the brokerage account either way. Um, I mean, Sean, if you want to make good money day trading, I'm not going to tell you not to. It's a free country. Um, but that's not really what I do. I've done very minimal trading before. It really depends on the debt. So this is where you really get into to a lot of theory about debt management. It's never a terrible idea to pay off all your debt. So I don't have any debt right now. I am debtless. Um, uh, Part of the problem is that I had like no credit history, so because I haven't had any loan in a while, so um, I would need to actually build credit before certain opportunities open up to me. But I don't have to worry about like bankruptcy or anything, right? That's not a problem I have looming over my head. Um, and Sean, is what easy? Oh, Mr. B, I don't really talk a lot about index funds. There's not a lot to say about those. I can give you a very quick rundown on anyone if asked, but um, I find that usually just buying a broad market index like the S&P 500 or maybe even a total market index. As long as it's a very diversified stock index, usually those are going to average between 8 and 10% each year. And um, getting into the specifics of like what's a better index fund than another, I feel like if you're getting to the point that you're analyzing index funds that much, you're making an argument just to pick stocks, because if you're going to put that time and attention into an index fund, you can magnify the potential from that same attention span through stock picking. Um, and so Sean was asking about day trading. So some folks can make money day trading, um, but usually people tend to lose money. That's usually where the psychology of investing um, messes people up. The trades I've done have been, so I'll give you an example. One trade that I did that made me money, and it's one of the few examples where I decided to be a trader rather than an investor. It was in July, um, when Trump got shot. Right, so that happened on a Saturday, and the market would open again on Monday. So after seeing, what had been discussed in the media and on the internet in the 2 days that followed Trump getting shot, I had really good reason to think that gun stocks would be up. And there was one gun manufacturer I had researched before and thought was a good company. So I thought, if I think it's a good company, probably a lot of the other investors will. This is a stock that's likely to rally on Monday. I spent $500 on call contracts for Smith and Wesson. I have not explained what call contracts are, and I'm not going to in this moment. But they're basically something that allows me to get an enhanced return rather than buying the stock outright, and it's much easier to exit too. So I put $500 in Smith and Wesson call contracts at market open. Within an hour, I exited with $1,200. So I made a little bit over a $700 profit on that.
Just
Right?
from seeing Trump get shot.
Yes, but that's the thing. It's a very unique situation where you knew that the market was going to have this um, very big response, and it wasn't something that was already priced in. Right? Market closes on Friday, opens on Monday, and so people always say, "Oh, this is already priced in." Well, no one knew Trump was going to get shot over the weekend, so the prices were going to adjust
One person
to
did.
Trump being shot, and I knew that, but that doesn't happen all the time, right? Like that's a very rare thing for a presidential candidate to get shot,
Well,
and so like that's
not
why
so
I felt
much anymore.
well, maybe not, but it's something that like I cannot be a day trader doing that. Right? I cannot do that every day. Like that was a one-time thing, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just go for it. And I don't know if I will ever be able to replicate that. So I'm not saying trading can't be lucrative, but it really needs to be a high certainty, high confidence thing. And you don't have that a lot with day trading. And only if I'd say a handful of people have this good intuition on the way the market is working on a trading basis and sort of gauging what the mood of the market is, that they could consistently get profits out of it. And um, I think it is a lot harder for people temperamentally to be able to do that successfully, because it is a very scary thing. That's when volatility actually does become risk. And um, most people are better off um, doing a long-term approach and just letting their money compound for them over time. Um, Now, to what Mr. B was saying about paying off every penny of debt, um, 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 well, don't worry about what the government does. There are always businesses that are attractively priced for you. If you were to buy them now, you could make a lot of money over enough period of
But
time.
then
There's
they would
always at
lose all
least a
that
few.
victimhood status.
Exactly. So the victimhood status, you got to drop that if you're get into investing. You have to think, I am managing my own risk, and if it's something where the government's role is going to mess up your investment, you shouldn't be investing in it, and you should have the intelligence not to invest in that in the first place. Um, and that's really what this is. You got to manage your own risk. Like investing is more about risk management than making profits. If you think making profits come ahead of risk management, you're not an investor. You're a gambler. Um, and in fact, I saw this very nice sort of 45-minute video lesson by a successful investor named Howard Marks, and he talked about this, and he said basically it's much better to try and be just as good as the market in good times and then simply experience less loss during bad times. So if the market is up 10%, you want to be up 10%, and that's the average of the market over time is 10% each year. But when the market has a down year, if they go down for 10%, if you really manage your risk well, you'll only be down 5%. And over time, that will enhance your compounding greatly over the market. So um, there's a lot of things that go into risk management, which we can always discuss later. But um, to the question of paying off debt, a lot of that does depend on well, I would say the 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 way naive investors are duped by pump and dumps is that one, they're not investors; they are
And can you
speculators.
tell what a pump and
Yeah.
dump is?
So pump and dump is when somebody puts in a lot of buy orders to pull a stock price up. They create artificial demand for a stock, we'll say, and then they will some try to influence many other people in the market, many other speculators, to buy that same asset and follow the momentum, and then they will get momentum to build up on its own. And then once that momentum is built up on its own enough, and the person who was pumping the stock is satisfied with how much it's gone up over what they initially bought in at, then they will sell. So they will dump it. Basically, you will pump the price up and then dump the stock that they had and secure themselves a profit. And then
Like
everyone that they
troll.
got
That
this,
sounds like troll investing.
it's kind of like trolling, except for them it's not just about getting under the skin of other people in the market, but they actually can make quite a
Yeah,
bit of
they get
money doing
actual
that.
payoff. And
So
so
I would
that's
say,
like there's no way to prevent this. It's something that people are allowed to do.
so market manipulation is a crime, but there are ways. It's a gray area. There are
It's
ways
a
you can legally,
white collar crime though.
right? There are ways you can legally still influence things. Like, you can um, go on CNBC and say, "Hey, I think this is a great stock. This is a great business," right? And by the way, I own shares of it, but I think it's a great business. And then if the market, says, "Hey, I'm going to listen to what Joe said," and they start buying it, and the stock goes up like 30, 40%, and then you could say, "Okay, I'm going to sell now," um, right? And there's nothing wrong. Like you're allowed to have opinions on stocks, right? If anyone who had a positive opinion of a stock got arrested for it, like it would be so difficult just to do any investing. It'd be you couldn't ever share ideas. Right? I couldn't even be talking to you guys right now, probably. So um, if if there's like a calculated, coordinated way to try and manipulate the market, um, that's a different thing, and it's kind of hard to prove. Like if what you're doing is market manipulation versus just having an
It's
opinion
that
that
gray
happens to
area
take
that the
off.
crooks can operate in.
Right. So if we talk about like with GameStop, right? That investor Deep Fucking Value, also known as Roaring Kitty, he shared what his opinion was on Reddit, but he had no way to expect that it would just be so well received by the community and actually lead to the biggest short squeeze in history. Um, so that's why he was not convicted of market manipulation, even though he was investigated and interviewed um, about it, or were forced to testify, um, because he was just some guy on Reddit, in a community where people regularly share their opinions, and his just, became popular. So, but really, Mr. B, I would just say that if you're really an investor, you are managing your risk, and so pump and dumps will never affect you. If you're getting duped by it, you're not an investor, you're a speculator. And speculators, they're not about risk management so much. They're more profit chasing, short term focused. They're adding a lot of risk to what they do. Now, Sean Kelly, hedge fund is kind of this catch all term for private investment funds that usually deal with large amounts of capital. So they have very rich clients. Like, so a lot of like actors and singers will give their money to hedge funds to invest. And then maybe even big businesses that just have some extra cash that they want to
So it's
invest
like a
somehow.
collective fund that like people pool their money
Yeah, I mean,
into.
all funds are like that, really. But a hedge
Oh.
fund is not publicly listed, so an ETF, an exchange traded fund, which is how most people do index investing now. They do it through an ETF. That's publicly traded. Like you can type in a symbol in your trading screen with your broker, for an ETF. It'll come up. Um,
Is that the Pelosi thing? Like people cannot get over that. I hear that all the
yeah, I
time.
know. And again, quit worrying about other people's success. There are plenty of things you can buy
Yeah, you
in the
sound petty
market.
and resentful.
Yeah, like I have.
It's very
Is it
beta.
is it ideal that our House Speaker can just print money for herself trading? Is it possible she's? I think what's more likely is that she is facilitating legislation based on perverse incentives than how much money she makes in the market. But when I'm looking at investments, I'm thinking, oh, I'd be so much richer now in my portfolio if Nancy Pelosi didn't. I never think that because it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect what I do. The facts of the investment will affect that. Pelosi, and I also know how her trading works. Like what its interaction with the financial markets are, and it will not affect me one way or another. If she stopped doing what she's doing right now and sat on her hands and never traded again, it would not help or hurt me in any way. Um, it's not matter. Yeah. So paying off debt. With paying off debt, this is something that actually a lot of companies have to consider as well because they will regularly have debt on their balance sheet. What really matters is one, how long it takes to pay off, and two, um, what the cost of capital is, which is another way of saying the interest. But when you're taking a loan to raise capital for your business, the interest the interest is the cost of capital for you. For individuals, unless you're taking a loan because part of it for you is how you plan to make money. Like maybe Jeff spent a lot of money on his personal business, and
Oh,
then
he
he
did.
realized he didn't. And then he realized he didn't have enough for groceries that month, so he took out a
Mm-hmm.
personal loan from the bank.
Sounds
Maybe
familiar.
for him, it's a cost of capital for him then. Um, and so one way of looking at it is if your interest rate is um, lower than what you expect your long-term return to be, and if it's debt that will take a long time to be paid off, like a mortgage, um, then you don't necessarily have to hurry to pay it off because um, you're basically financing your own growth with that. So in theory, you could take a 30-year home mortgage. So take a house you have totally paid off. You could take a 30-year home mortgage with like, we'll say 4% fixed interest, and then invest it in something that will give a return of about 10% or more over time. Um, in most cases, you're going to make money doing that, and you have enough time that as long as your near-term cash flow situation is stable, that you can know that you make all the monthly mortgage payments. That's not a bad way to do it. And given just a few years, your gains in the portfolio will probably be enough that if you did need to tap into it to help cover some of the mortgage payments, you'd be fine. I think the only time you wouldn't want to do that is if like I was doing it at a market bubble. But if honestly a pretty low risk way, I, I'm not suggesting people do this, but because you would really need a plan for it, you really need to know what you're investing. But it would not be that risky for a disciplined investor to take out a 30-year mortgage on their home, like within say a year after a major market crash, and use that to invest in stocks that they know very well. Um, that would be not actually that risky, especially if they still have an income in the meantime and they can, in the near term, make the mortgage payments. Now, if they don't have an income and they really depend on the near term results of that move to start paying off the monthly mortgage payments that I assume would be due starting the next month, then that would be a bad idea. But um, it just the logic of it is if 4% is your interest or your cost of capital and 10% is your return, you're in no hurry to pay it off. And that was a conversation I would have with folks at Fidelity who were thinking about how much they wanted to add to their 401k versus pay off their mortgage. And I would say, well, how many more years do you have on the mortgage? Oh, we've got 15 more years. What's the interest rate? It's 4%. I'd be like, okay. So um, instead of paying off your mortgage early, if your cash flow situation is fine, which you've made it clear to me it is, you make this much These are your monthly expenses. Um, you will grow your wealth more quickly over time, investing um, in like a stock index. Because in a 401k, you can usually only do a stock index. You can't pick stocks. Then paying out the mortgage. Like by the time that mortgage is paid off, they will have made a lot more money because they were putting the excess in their 401k instead of paying off their mortgage early. Um, and so paying off the mortgage early is really only advantageous if you have reason to believe that your situation will change and you will not be able to make all the payments off in time and you want to go ahead and get it done now. But a lot of people who have sufficient income for their living expenses can say, you know what, I will get a higher return on capital over time. Because that's another thing too. When you pay off debt, you get a return out of that. So if you have credit card debt that's like 20% interest and you pay off your debt early, your return on capital is 20%, which is actually a great return on capital. Now you artificially made that by giving yourself a bunch of credit card debt in the first place. But from the point of view of an investor, whether you add something to your portfolio, you get an asset, or you eliminate a liability, the return on capital works both ways. So if you get something that returns 20% or you pay off a debt that costs 20%, that's a 20% return on capital for the transaction. Um, and so you got to look at it like that. When banks um, give out mortgages, right? They're looking at it the same way. They're like, okay, what interest are we going to pay our customers on their deposits? If they pay 1% interest and then they can give out 3% mortgages to folks, that 2% interest is their gain. Um, and banks, that's how they make a big chunk of their money. They have been making money doing that for maybe 2 centuries now. I guess it depends on how you want to define the current banking as being like when it was born. But um, yeah, so credit card debt, you're almost always better paying that off, and that would be a conversation I would have with our 401k participants at Fidelity. Is they've at first they would talk about how much debt they have, and then I'd be like, okay, so how much debt of that is your mortgage versus credit cards? And they would break it up. They'd be okay, 13,000 is what's left on the mortgage, 7,000 is credit cards, and I would say, okay, it makes sense to go ahead and pay off the credit card debt because the interest is almost always double digit or higher. So it's the cost of capital is higher than what a stock index is likely to return over time. But the mortgage, if it's like 4 or 5%, no reason to hurry to pay that off. You're basically kicking a lot of the effects of inflation toward the bank when you do that, because their interest is fixed, so the actual purchasing power that they get from that interest declines with time because of inflation. So you're letting them eat the effects of inflation for you by not hurrying to pay off your mortgage if
That's
your
so
return is
nice
going
of
to be
them
higher.
that they can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
But the banks get their own
so
financing.
we set up the brokerage account. We got the money loaded, and it's in the money market. So I think next time it's like, okay, what's the next step? I'm ready to buy stocks. I'm ready to pick stocks, and so
Okay.
we could take it up from there next time. I think I'm gonna pop the link and get the panel going for people that want to come up, and we can still talk stocks. I just want to open it up. All right, there you go.
How many people we got
Right
watching
now
right
it
now?
well, it had dropped to 4. We're back up to 7. Hey, Pleasant.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out if this would make a good type of content to like put behind a membership tier, because it's not going to draw the same crowd that a normal
Yeah,
open
because it's not the
stream would
drama.
draw. Right.
Like I could have gone the Dramatic route. I could have said, you know what, I'm pretty fucking pissed at Pelosi too. Let's talk about it, right? But no.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Any other questions from chat? Because I think I've done my initial like the the basic lecture that I'm going to do. But any just additional questions wouldn't be bad. And Jeff, while we're waiting for their questions, how do you feel about all this? Like on the other side of it?
Oh, my brain is already shut down. This is the
Okay.
problem with me and money and numbers and all that. I've reached my,
Yeah, no,
my
it's not uncommon. Like I think any type of lecture, once you hit an hour, hour and a half, almost everyone's attention span shut down. Even my attention span will shut down. Eventually, you need to get up and walk, or just talk about something else. So we got to take this in doses. All right, it's like the COVID vaccine, right? You get your first shot, then you're going to get boosted, and you're going to feel great by that fourth booster. Now we're going to see how many people got triggered by my COVID booster joke.
oh, I'm also multitasking.
Mr. B said, if you pay your credit card debt off every day, week, or month and have cash back, they are paying you to spend your money. So I'm glad that Mr. B pointed that out because um, just thinking like that is thinking like an investor, right? It's talking about like what your return is, what your risks are. Like, what's the risk of paying off the debt? None, right? You know what the upside is. You eliminate the interest expense, and then you also get a return from the cash back. And investing is more than just stocks, right? And there can be things you can do if you are a mindful person. You can just sort of spot opportunities like that that might not even be connected to your brokerage account, but are still helpful. Yeah, I might need to get a
All
credit
right.
card at some point so I can build up my credit. That's the problem with me is that I'm so frugal that I just don't spend things a lot, and I just I haven't built up credit. And then
Yeah, I
sometimes
didn't have credit
having
for
credit is
for
helpful.
years and years until I started my business. Then I had to use some of it. But I was the
Yeah,
same way.
so
I avoided it.
yeah, and it was crazy because like this laptop I have now, I would try to get financing for it, and they wouldn't let me get financing. And it's like it's a $1,200 laptop, and it's like I have 900 right now in my bank account. I would just have to move some from another account, and that would take a few business days. I want to buy it today,
It's a broken
and I
system.
and I couldn't get approved for like find a 10-month plan where I would basically pay like a little under $100 every month with 0% interest. Right? I have guess how old I am, Internet God. Guess how old I am.
I was always told growing up that property is one of the best things you could own.
The Internet God guessed that I am yes. That's an interesting guess. But no, I'm not that old. So land. A lot of people say land is a good investment, but it really depends on what the real estate market is, right? And that would probably be a better way of thinking about it is just real estate. And because real estate, it depends on what you do with it. So any parcel could be a place for people to live. It could be a place for a business to run. Um, and you have to think about it like that. And if you're buying land in Colorado, that's probably more likely to go well for you over time than um, if you were to buy it in a place where the price of the real estate has already been jacked up. So I don't know that you could get a good return on real estate in New York or Los Angeles.
But
And
probably
for the
Wyoming.
average, yeah. So like I would say any place like kind of like in the plains or the Rockies where there aren't a lot of people, you're probably much more likely to get real estate at a price that you could afford, and then see it grow substantially within the next 10 years or so. And probably at a rate that's as good as investing in the stock market or better. Um, but I would just say, like, use the same logic of investing with real estate. What are you going to do to get value out of it other than just wait for the market to say we will pay more for it, right? If you can enhance the value that the real estate gives you, it's much more likely to work well for you. So I would say you can do it, but you should always look at things like that with an entrepreneurial mindset, right? So writing for Seeking Alpha, for example,
Is that something everyone has, or can it be developed at everyone?
you know what? I mean, it's like I don't think everyone has it, right? There's like that saying that there's 10% of the population that basically cannot be hired to do anything. Um, So, uh, and then someone's always just going to have to look after them, right? They're going to be, a dependent or something. Um, and they'll probably live with their mom, and their job is they maybe help her knit things and sell it to Goodwill or whatever kind of thing. But
That's
I guess if we're talking about
entrepreneurial.
people, it's something, right? But I'm saying like that's sort of like if we're really trying to think of what can they do that's entrepreneurial, probably something like that. We're talking about real estate and managing that in an entrepreneurial way. Obviously, I don't think everybody is going to naturally be able to do that. Some will find it easier than others. Um, so yeah, Mr. B, if you invest in land and just sit on it, taxes eat away every year. That's true. The reason property taxes exist is because they are trying to encourage the property owners to create value with the property.
That
Right? They
sounds
kind
like
of
a good thing.
it is a good thing. So people hate
What?
property taxes because they're annoying, but
Right, they
um,
complain. Well, it's a conspiracy to keep us enslaved or something, and you don't really own your stuff because you have to pay taxes on it or get licenses or stuff.
yeah, and so like um, but if the city wants to have a budget to like pay for the things that make the city run, they need a revenue source. And so by having a property tax, they're basically saying like, all right, turn your property into a natural revenue source, and then we can pay for things, and we can be a community. That's the essential logic of it.
Wait, say that again?
I said that the idea of property taxes is the city wants to be able to have a budget to pay for the things for the community, um, and it's much easier to do that if the citizens with their property are naturally able to make that into a revenue source, right? Your property is a revenue source for you, therefore it's a revenue source for the city, and therefore the people in the city get to have things that tie them together as a community. They get to have parks, they get to have roads that work.
Yeah.
Um, they get to restore the local movie theater, whatever that they're going to do. Um, and so plus police and fire department and stuff. Um, yeah, so that's why it's a different incentive system maybe than other forms of taxation, certainly. Like sales taxes, those kind of deter you from spending in some ways, um, because you only experience that if you spend the money. Whereas the property taxes, you have it either way. So like you need to make this asset work for you to pay for itself. It's like some people have suggested that I subscribe to a research AI tool. And for me, I'm just thinking if this is the subscription, how much would my revenue increase in relation to it? I would want to see my revenue like increase substantially before I spend whatever the subscription cost is. Unless I just personally like having the AI tool and I don't care about that. But since for me it would be a business decision, I'm like, if it's $20 a month, am I going to see $100 a month in revenue from this? And I'm gaining 80, right? Yeah. Oh, as far as what my age is, let's look at what the guesses are. Um, wait, where did it go?
21 and 30. I mean 20. Fuck. 28 and 31, I think.
Okay, I am 32,
Ooh.
and I will be 33 pretty soon, but I'm 32 right now.
Sean Kelly gets it.
hmm What does he win? My most secret
Get
stock tip. No, I'm kidding.
get one free question.
Actually, maybe we can make prizes where people get a free question, and when we do the paywall thing, so
You can
they
win a
don't have to worry
wrench.
about that as much. That's right. Win a ranch. Oh, that's a nice prize. Ban people who ask stupid questions about stocks. Like, what Nvidia isn't a good stock? Ban this guy. I'm tired of seeing him talk about Nvidia. If you're ever in like an investing like internet community, people will get annoyed by stuff like that. Maybe not necessarily because of Nvidia, but like if what I have noticed is that in investing communities, people have their fixations about what investments are worth talking about all the time or not. And if you're have a different fixation, they'll just want to talk about how you're an idiot. Um, so yeah, there's always room for wrenches when we talk about investing. It just depends on um, who we're bringing in.
Yeah.
So
Keep.
my father would have smacked you upside the head and said, "Grow up and get a credit card." Um, Interesting. I know someone has a black card. Well, my debit card for my bank is black, so I think they make a lot of the cards now black just to make them look cool. Um, yeah, it's credit card or rent a car, debit card will not suffice.
They don't look cool. The black card is ugly to me.
Yeah, my issue, especially in my 20s, was like I just didn't feel the need to spend money on a lot of things, and I just saved my money. And it's not like, oh, I don't have the money yet, let me use my credit card to make sure I can buy this. I was never in that situation. I always had the money to buy something. Except for that period of my life where I lived in my car. Even then, I didn't completely run out of money. I moved into my car to preempt completely running out of money. That was before I got into finance and investing. I got into finance and investing because I um, wanted to make sure I didn't end up like that again. Is Bitcoin the future money? I don't know. I am skeptical of that, just because. Um, well, let's see what Mr. B said. He's not talking about Bitcoin. Okay. Um, so I really don't know about Bitcoin right now. People are treating it. People who are touting it as the future currency are also treating it as this investment asset, and it can't be both. Um, Either we use it as a currency, and then in which case it's going to have pretty stable value, and it's not going to grow like the market or better over time. In which case, saying that it's a great investment asset doesn't make sense. Like at some point, the price needs to stabilize, and in which case, you don't really expect the value of it to increase, or it never becomes a currency, and it's always something where essentially you're going to try and sell it for a higher profit in the future. And Bitcoin proponents are trying to sell two narratives at once, and I don't think they're lying. I think it's really that they're not thinking about the logical consequences of both of those things being stated. So I don't own any Bitcoin, and I don't really have much interest in it. And that is the other disappointing thing about when you are in the investing community is, yeah, again, I consider a lot of people who say that they do investing are not actually investors. They're speculators, and they're either day trading stocks or they are crypto fanatics, and they're not people who really look at things from a cash flow perspective, a risk management perspective, with the same kind of like entry and exit plans that I think someone who actually calls themselves an investor would have. Investment strategies may vary depending on your age. Risk investments might be okay when you're on. Well, again, if we're talking about risk, um, you always want to contain your risk, whatever age you are. If you're using risk to talk about volatility, um, maybe, but generally, even as you reach retirement, if you have built up your wealth substantially, you will probably not need a lot of that to cover your living expenses. And so, when you retire, I mean, what? If you're healthy, you could live another 20, 30 years once you retire. That's a long period of time. So you might as well still be invested for the long run. Plus, if you don't spend everything, um, your heirs could be, um, part of that long-term time frame as well, and what they're going to do with it for the rest of their lives. So really depends on everyone's individual situation. Only if you really want to spend most or all of it would you want to move it into cash and get it out of the market. But if you're not intending to do that, I think this idea that, oh, you're older, so you need to be in less risky investments doesn't make sense. The old people who switch to bonds start killing their purchasing power almost immediately because the interest they get from the bonds is not going to keep up with inflation as well as the average return of the stocks over time. So it's good for me as a younger person when old people start switching to bonds because they just have a general effect of keeping the prices of stocks down. It's much more likely that I'll be able to find a stock that I think is undervalued and therefore an investment opportunity.
Zatoichi,
Hello.
good
How are
morning.
you?
Do you have
Good
any
morning.
stocks?
Yes, I do, sir. I have 44 shares of Tilray, and I
Oh,
have. Yeah. What do you mean? Oh,
I don't even know what that
well,
is.
they were a
so it's
medical marijuana stock that they were jumping between $12 and $14, a share all the time, or even going lower and higher, and it was a great thing to make money on. And then as soon as I invested in 44 shares of it, it dropped below $5 and never rose above it again.
Is that where you keep buying the gummies?
What?
Is that why you keep buying the gummies to recover your loss?
No, man. How does buying gummies recover my loss? It
You
just
said it
makes
was a
me.
marijuana company, right?
Oh yeah, it was Tilray. They have operations in Germany and all over the world, but the problem is they don't turn a profit, and now I'm stuck with this worthless stock.
oh, we're not stuck with it. You could just sell it and eat the loss.
Yeah, sell it
Always an
at a
option.
loss. I could sell it at a loss and then buy what? What do I buy in its place?
Well, Jeff had an idea. You could buy more gummies.
Put it in the money market until
Yeah,
you
I'll
figure
just
Yeah.
out a new stock.
I'll buy enough gummies so that I overdose and don't have to worry
And
about
you don't
money
have to
ever
work
again.
to think about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. But the
Yeah,
only
I've
reason
never
I
heard
say
of
that
them.
is
I'm
because
looking them up
is
now.
is nobody's stuck with a stock. You can always just sell at a loss, and just live with it. It's not an
Here's
easy
my
thing to say,
question
but
though. Here's
Mhm.
my question. What if the stock went to zero? What happens then?
um, well then you could write off everything that you lost. So whatever amount you put in, I don't remember how much you said, but if it's in a taxable account, there would be the option to write off all of that loss and count it against your tax liability for that tax year. If it's in like a retirement account or other non-taxable account, that's not an option.
No, it's not. It's just in Robinhood.
Okay. Yeah, so that's something that you could do. So you just got to do it during the tax year if you wanted to count for that filing period. But yeah, it's what stock you would put into then I think would just sort of depend on like what's a stock that you feel like you have a good idea about. Like I'd be curious to know what got you interested in Tilray and why um that seemed like a good investment idea to you at the time. The reason I said oh when you mentioned it is because you didn't mention a really common stock. Like usually when people talk about stocks they own, they say Nvidia or Google or Meta or just something that a lot
Apple.
of people already have. Yeah.
No, I'm not the average investor, let's say. No, I have no money, but
That's
what I
a
do and what I
very
do
good thing.
invest in, I do my research on. Like for example, when the whole GameStop fiasco was going on, I actually made a couple $100 off of the GameStop, volatility, going
Mhm.
up and going down and going up and going down. When
Mhm.
it was overvalued. So I don't know. I'm a joker when it comes to investing.
Is it
So
because it
that's
was
why.
Okay.
weed? It was just a weed stock.
No, I did it because I saw the way it was going up and down, and I thought, well, when it goes up to $15 a share, I will sell it, and when it goes back down to $12 a share or 11 or 10, I will buy it,
Oh,
and
so
then
you
I
were
will.
looking for something volatile so that you
Well,
can
this
hit
was
those
volatile.
peaks.
This was volatile for a while. I made a person I worked with. He invested $1,000 into this same marijuana company that I suggested to him, and he says he made $10,000 from it. And I didn't make that kind of money, and I was the one who told him to do it.
Oh,
He offered to take me to a dinner. I was like, "Fuck you and your dinner. Give me $3,000."
did you tell him
Give
that?
me- no, I did
Oh,
not. because I didn't advise him to invest in it, or maybe I did advise him to invest in it, but that was up to him. That wasn't my call. You know. Anywho, did I just kill the panel,
No,
Jeff?
apparently the
No.
SpaceX crew is lifting off.
Jeff, look
Oh,
at
okay.
my gay mustache. Do I have the gay
No,
cop?
well, you look. What's that guy? Rip Torn. He was kind of gay. That's what it reminds me
Rip
of.
Torn.
But that's the only sin, and I think the skulls kind of mitigate
Yeah, I
against
got
any
quiet because I was
gayness.
trying to look up.
Plus, we have a
'Cause
ginger on panel that trumps
yeah,
all
Mr.
that.
Yeah,
B
the
asked
ginger.
for a chart comparing the Dow Jones Industrial Index to um gold over the last 50 years. So I was trying to pull up a chart I could show on that. So I'm trying to find one. And Sean Kelly said I would short fossil fuel companies because of climate change.
He's an
I would never
eco-terrorist,
short.
though.
I would never short anything. If we were talking about like an actual short position, that is something I would never do. Nobody should ever
Why?
do that in my view.
Why?
Because it requires you to trade on margin, and margin adds significant additional risk. And shorting in particular is a much more risky form of margin trading.
But isn't that
Yeah.
how the GameStop guy made his millions by shorting, the
So
the
he
market?
squeezed the short. He squeezed the shorts, and the shorts actually exposed themselves to a lot of risk that a bunch of retail investors exploited. So that's actually a good example of like why shorting is risky. Is something like that could happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual squeeze, but if the stock price goes up while you're in a short position, your liability is pretty high. Um, yeah, so anything that requires trading in a margin account is not something um, that I think is ever permissible. I think margin accounts shouldn't exist. I think margin accounts are absolute degeneracy, and it's an insult that they are even
No.
allowed in the first place. Because what you're doing is you're um, making trades with borrowed money, and that has the potential to blow things up in your face and magnify potential losses. If you're interested in managing your risk, you do not do margin trading ever. You just do it through brokerage account with money that you already have. And if you want to use some form of leverage, it has to be something that isn't very likely to blow up in your face. So that's why I mentioned like a 30-year mortgage for a disciplined investor is a pretty low risk way to give themselves a levered return, because um, if the price of your stocks crash temporarily, the bank that gave you your home mortgage isn't going to say, "Hey, you need to sell your stocks at a loss since um, you know we want to make sure the mortgage gets paid." Margin accounts work like that. They will make you sell your stocks at a loss to recover the principal. That's why it's so risky. Um, but if you have like long-term financing and it's flexible and you have a lot of control of the terms over it, and you're a disciplined investor and you know which assets you're picking with that, then it's different. Um, banks, when they use deposits to give out mortgages, the deposits is leverage, right? But there's no upcoming due date. The people who make checking accounts aren't going to say, "Hey, you need to sell these mortgages at a loss to make sure we get our deposits." That doesn't really happen. That's effectively what a bank run would cause. But now there are capital requirements to protect banks from bank runs, so that doesn't really happen anymore.
Can I just ask you a serious
Mhm.
question?
Sure.
Do you think about anything except money? Like, do you play a guitar? Are you into poetry or
Oh, sure.
literature or something?
Yeah. So, well, when I've been on with Jeff, we've talked a bit about like stuff in the news, like political stuff doesn't really have to do with investing. So like one of the games I've been into lately is Age of Empires 2. I went on a trip to Wisconsin.
Are you
Um,
shitting me, dude? I play
yeah,
that game all the time. All the
yeah,
time.
and I visited a buddy there. Um, and he introduced me to the game, and I got it, and I've been playing it. I actually need to get a new mouse, um, because mine busted like a week ago. Um, and then I'll be able to play again. But like that's something I've been into lately. I've been a pretty avid gamer most of my life. Um, Not as much in adulthood, just because what I did is I figured out ways to use some of my gamer logic to find professional opportunities. So actually, when I do a lot of things in investing, I often sort of like I'm just calling upon things I learned playing games. Like I tell folks that I actually learned investing initially not by studying a bunch of financial stuff, but by playing the board game Risk. To me, Risk is a good simulation of the kinds of decisions you have to make when you're an investor, even though it's a military context rather than a business or financial context. Um, and so for me, a lot of it does just sort of feel like playing Risk, except I get to make money doing it too. So um, there's that.
You also get to lose money doing it, right?
Yeah, if you're not managing your risk, but I think that's actually why it's appropriate that board game ended up being called Risk, is because you have to learn how to contain your risk in the game. Monopoly is actually a good board game in that sense too, if you can play with people who don't lose their minds. But Monopoly, like a lot of games that sort of simulate business or economics, the way you win is by growing your wealth. But the way with Monopoly works is you don't really grow your wealth much in that. It's much more about managing your risk and the person who does that most effectively. Because you're basically your goal is to be the last one who doesn't go bankrupt. It's different than something like Settlers of Catan, where you're building up your merchant empire is sort of like the framing of it, and you don't really like have a potential to lose everything. You're just slowly gaining, and um, it's a very different type of game. And a lot of like economics or business board games are structured like that, where you can slowly or quickly gain. If you're bad at the game, you just slowly gain, but you don't really lose things. But Monopoly, you can lose everything you built up. And so
Yeah.
when I've watched people who like will do Monopoly streams with their friends. Since they're playing with friends, they tend to get along better, and it's not um like when you play with like your family members as a kid and you get in fights. Um, and so what I found is the Monopoly players who win the most consistently are, whether they're consciously doing this or not, the ones who manage their risk the most effectively. Um,
Hey, Rick.
yeah. So um, then other things I do, like throughout different parts of my life, like I've done things like poetry and art, like here and there. I actually like to make art on Microsoft Paint the most of anything. So I like it because it's a very unusual medium that hasn't really, I think, been um, like explored much, and so I
Do
think
you
there's a
do
lot
you
more
like
room for novelty.
music? Do you like music?
No, I hate music. Music killed my parents.
No, I mean, do you
No,
really like music, like where you can get into the rhythms and feel what's happening and be like, yeah, I'm
I
in tune with this.
I wouldn't say I'm a super musical person. I enjoy it as I think as much as any average person listening to a good song. But I know that like really musical people like almost have this spiritual connection with music.
Yeah,
That's not me.
yeah. No.
Yeah, see, I knew
I'm not a
that. I
dancer.
knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that from what you were saying, and I only
Mhm.
asked you because I wanted to hear you say it. But
Okay.
it's true. You're
What is your spiritual connection to?
money.
Um.
No, I don't think so.
No, I mostly do this because it's the thing that actually I feel like it makes me actually depend on money the least, just because I don't have to. I'm not in a situation where I have to worry somebody's going to cut off my money, and then that might force me to do bad things. Um, so I'm not really worried about that anymore, and I can actually focus more on a lot of other things. It's just um, I've always had a sense of things being um like what is a good return like for what I get, even if it's not monetary. With investing, it's easier to make it into a profession because there are very objective numbers to it, and it can be quantified and tracked and calculated more easily. But I've had some things like interpersonal relationships where I would just sort of look at how I had known that person, the things I had experienced, what I had invested into that relationship, and I would think, I don't really like the return I got on my investment. I did all this stuff, and what is this person like now? Mr. B wants that chart. Let me see
I'll
if I
get
can
the.
find
What's
it.
the chart, Mister B? I'll get it. The don't Dow Jones versus gold.
By the
Yeah.
way, Jeff, look at my avatar. That's me from 4 years
I
ago.
know we were looking at the other day.
Were
I
you?
forgot who was on here. Here, let me put it up. That's when you went to Walmart like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did I tell that
I
story
still
on
can't believe
you?
that's you. That looks like a rock star from the '70s.
Well, I've been accused of looking like a rock star from the '70s
Oh,
when I
it's
had
cool
long
as
hair.
hell. Very Gen X.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted to ask that.
Oh, I came up with a whole bunch of charts. I'll let Joe figure out which one is the right
Okay. I'm
one.
trying to see if I can find a good one. I don't. Am I able to screen share on here?
He's being a carrot. What's the B stand for? Beta? Just kidding. Yeah. If you present your screen, I'll be able to add it to the stage.
Okay. I'm trying to see how to pull it up on Seeking Alpha. I don't know what symbol they use for gold on here, though.
Seeking
That's my
Alpha, is that
issue.
a dating site? I need to sign up.
Hey, you know what? That would be a much better name for a dating site than what it actually is.
Uh,
But that's where I write my stock analysis and publish it online. So that's how I make most of my income um, outside of what I do in my portfolio.
oh, cool. Like people on Substack do.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, except it's the monetization structure is different, but it's very similar. It's subscriber based, and it turns out people who have capital tend to be willing to pay big subscriptions and not really feel it. So
Oh, that's good to know.
yeah.
Maybe, yeah, I could set up a little model like that here. The verbal version of it. So I don't see. I don't even. I don't know what any of this means. I know what a Dow Jones. They used to have the scrubbing bubbles. I remember the Dow bubbles. Um, and I know the Dow Jones is something they talk about on TV when they're doing the charts and the little ticker at the
The
bottom.
Dow Jones is another index.
Like,
It's
that's a
30
set of
companies.
stocks.
Yeah, it's a set of stocks, and it regularly changes depending on which stocks meet the criteria or not. It's similar to the
Okay.
S&P 500, but it's 30 companies instead of 500. Um,
Okay.
seriously,
Why is it so significant?
it's just sort of seen as like a measure of the market in general. So the Dow and the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 are like the three main market indices that are seen to sort of gauge like what the state of the market is and what investors are feeling. I don't know
Yeah,
if that is.
why are people talking about silver going up so much? Because well, years ago, my friend's parents used to go to Mexico and they would buy silver rings that were like huge chunks of silver that they would pay $5, $10 for. Why is silver so expensive now?
Um, well, I know minerals often have like cycles in which they go up and down. I'm not really sure what's driving it for silver at the moment. Um, silver isn't something I've been following a whole lot. Um, I've, I haven't really followed gold much either, but there are some gold miners I've looked at. Um, but they're both metals that aren't really used for a lot of industrial purposes, and so the demand for that is a bit hard to predict. But
Well,
iron is
gold is used for a lot of industrial purposes as far as audio because it's a great conductor for audio signals.
so it does have some, but if you look at like the overall use of gold, not much of it's for industrial purposes. Very little of gold that is mined actually gets used for industrial purposes. Most of it is used for jewelry, if it's used for anything at all, and then a lot of it is just held in reserve and never used for anything.
So why would silver prices go up?
It could just be that more people want to buy silver than the current supply is making available, and it just depends on things like how much are global silver miners have they reached the point where they've increase their supply and their production. And then there's the other end of that period is when their production goes down. They've mined their easily accessible silver veins, and so they would have to expand their mines more to get to the next area where the silver ore is, and it'll be a few years before they can get to that. And globally, miners tend to have ebbs and flows like that, where suddenly they're producing a lot of minerals, and then they have to reinvest in the mine to access the next bit once they've cleared out a certain area of their deposits.
It's like the dwarves in the Lord of the Rings.
I mean, yeah, basically.
You say basically, but have you ever read the Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I think the one difference is that we don't have to worry about delving too greedily and too deep.
Right, and then awaken Durin's Bane.
Exactly. I am trying to find a chart. Seeking Alpha uses some really weird symbol for
Here, let me go.
gold. This is so annoying. I don't know why they can't make it simple.
Let me try to find it.
I mean, goddamn. Is it gold dash USD? Why do I don't want to see Bitcoin gold. What the hell is that even?
All right, I think so. Tell me if this is what you're looking for, B.
Silver and
ratio.
gold, silver and gold.
Here, let me pull up one that's. All right, try this one. I'm assuming the blue is. I don't have the legend. The gold is gold.
It's good as gold.
There we go.
And
I
the
found the
blue,
ticker that they're using. I think I found it.
the blue is blue balls on the stock
Okay.
market.
All right. All right.
Hey, Spike, what's up?
Okay. So
Even if
here's an
the
interesting.
apocalypse, I'm sorry.
The one that they've been waiting for thousands of years. That people
No,
are
I was
still
just
waiting
going to
for.
say, even if
Even
the
secular
apocalypse
people.
happened and you had precious metals, what good is it when you need food? No one's going to fucking trade you food for gold in the apocalypse.
I agree
You
with you
know?
there. I don't think the prepper people who like gold are really thinking that far ahead about it. Anyway, I found a chart. It's not 50 years because Seeking Alpha doesn't go back that far, but um, so um,
Food is worth more than gold.
It depends on the food.
It depends on the situation.
all right. So you can see this chart right here. Right.
What's this? The 1997,
This goes
22.
back to 1994. So it's not the
Oh,
last
okay.
50 years, but it is the last 30 years. So still a good chunk of time. I think it makes the point. So the purple line is the total return of the Dow Jones index. So that's the growth of the value of the stocks in it, as well as any dividends that were reinvested over time as well. And not taking into account the effects of taxation. And then orange is the spot price of gold over time. So you see that both are up, and that over time the Dow Jones is way ahead of gold, and gold only really surpassed the Dow briefly, and this was during the 2008 financial crisis when stocks went way down and a lot of people started moving into gold out of fear. But eventually, stocks caught up, and it just didn't last. And plus, gold had also been going down a lot by the 90s, so there was that as well.
Oh, he's saying the one I had up.
Yeah, but the stocks
And
will
we
do better
got
than
Mr.
gold in the
Vinny
long run.
himself, who I think might dabble in this.
Salute, gentlemen.
Hey, Vinny.
Salute.
What's up?
By that.
Yeah, but you
Yeah,
can see here they had this very complex symbol for gold, and I'm like, how is it put on here? So it's like gold,
S-
USD currency. Just took me forever to figure out which one
See
they
if
wanted.
it's this one, Mr. B. This
Vinny
is like
pots and pans.
2013,
what's up,
It's
2020.
probably going to
Rick?
show an even bigger difference. If it's 50 years, I mean, it's going to leave the Dow is probably going to leave gold in the dust.
You know, as far as silver, one needs to investigate and realize exactly what takes silver in order to produce the physical product. And I think most people around the world are not educated enough to understand the amount of silver that goes into electronics, medicines,
Teeth.
photography, computers, phone, you name it, cars. And with the green initiatives, Joe, I don't know if you've known, but probably the past 5 years now, everybody's been all into these solar panels. Now, if
Mhm.
you look up the cost ratio of how much silver it takes for one solar panel, which they're finding silver is a better conductor of electricity than any other fucking metal that they're
Even
throwing at
gold?
you.
Even
Yep.
gold?
Yes, sir. Now, I heard what you said, Zach. Now, gold is not in as much things as you would think it is. Gold, for most people, is a hedge against inflation. They dig it up, they whatever they do, it's jewelry and whatnot. It has some applications, obviously, but its main purpose is just bury it somewhere. Get as much of it and keep burying it. Get it and bury it. Silver, unlike the gold, and the reason why they price suppress it so much, because if you look at inflation from a dollar from like 1919 compared to today, the price of silver has been suppressed for over 200 years. And if you go to the gold to silver ratio, I think it's like 80 something to one. It should be on a 1-to-1 level with gold at this point. And all these
But why? Silver
manufacturing
has never been
and
as valuable as gold.
all the manufacturing companies, all the ones that need this product. The last thing Apple wants to see, this is an example. The last thing Apple wants to see is silver go more than $100. The more silver goes up, the more it's going to cost them to make their product, and the more we're going to have to pay for such product.
So
So,
Apple uses silver?
oh my God, every product that they use
My
that they
God.
makes needs silver.
What
If they
what
don't have
about
silver for, they're fucked.
no, but what about Samsung? Do they use
Same
it
thing.
as well?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Anybody who
Yeah.
manufacture, and not just them, anybody who's like Sony,
Sounds like the whole panel runs
PlayStation, I
on
mean,
silver.
all of it. Video games, all anything that you want to see on a TV screen is silver. And now I believe it takes, forget about the silver mines. And Mexico has been stripped the fuck out. Mexico is getting robbed left and right now because most of the people around the world, especially the country India, God bless them, they love silver and gold, the physical. And I don't blame them. So
Yeah,
if
well,
you would just look at
India.
if you would look at the main inputs in the past 3 years of how much gold, mostly silver, because you can't print it, you can't find it. Mexico's probably the last good spot on the planet for it. Continuing further, but it's been mined the fuck out. Silver is just a byproduct of gold. Is really all it is. Nobody just opens up and says, "Hey, we're gonna go for silver." No, it's usually go for gold, copper, but they're byproducts of the gold. You see.
Yeah.
And in order for a miner to take it out of the ground at $32 an ounce right now, it's not worth it. You know, it's got to go higher in order to get the product available, from getting it right to, the purchasing of the consumer. If every person in the United States today went out and bought 1 ounce of silver, you would be highly surprised how quickly the COMEX, Joe, you know what the COMEX is, right? That's the silver and gold. It's the money metals exchange. It's the Wall Street. It's the London Bullion Exchange. All these motherfuckers in the bank, on paper only, trade
Bruh.
nightly gold and silver in the millions of ounces that don't exist. And that's a whole other topic, but there's just a finite amount of it right now at this point. Nobody wants silver to go up because most industry would fail because they can't afford to purchase the ingredient, that one ingredient of silver that can make their final product, whatever that product may be. right down to a spoonful of medicine for your pet, is silver. All right, I'll take a break.
I am not giving my pet no goddamn silver spoon for medicine.
Do you know why they call it silver spoons, 444? Is because no
No.
bacteria can stick to silver. So babies,
Well, yeah. Hey,
babies back in the day had silver spoons because the parent
Bacteria's
would use the
healthy.
silver
We need
spoon
that. We need
if they were
bacteria.
afforded because there was no bacteria. That can grow.
listen to me. I had a neck operation, and I went out of the hospital that night, that next day, and I was supposed to be fine, but I had what they call MRSA, which is a staphylococcus
Yeah.
infection. Yeah, it's a very strong staphylococcus infection. So a week later, I'm sitting at my computer playing video games, and it's hurting me worse than it did the night I had the operation. So they sent me back to the hospital, and to make a long story short, when they sent me home, they treated my neck with silver nitrate. It
Yep.
had silver in it to kill the infection.
Yep. See, most people don't realize that. And I tell you the truth. I mean, I've learned all this stuff in the past 5 years. I started out when COVID started, guys, when we were all locked down, and I had some old Morgan dollars, a couple of Eisenhower. I was like, fuck it. It's an old coffee can of fucking coins that I was given as a kid. And I said, fuck it. I got nothing else to do. So I started going through it while I was online. And it's been probably one of the best, diggings around that I've done, and fun. Finding out collectability, finding out about the metals, the copper. I have copper as well. I have palladium as well. Not a whole lot of everything, but just enough to where I say this, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. If you don't have a car in your driveway, you don't have a car. If you don't have it when the banks say, you know what, we can't give you your money today, which is just paper, I'd rather have the physical as a good hedge. Now, not all of my paper is put into physical, but I would highly suggest anybody wanting to get a leg up for the future, for their family, for themselves, whatever. You have to have physical. Paper, stock market's fine. It's good to have a good little array of it, have your eggs in different baskets. That's fine. I applaud people like that.
But here's
when
the question.
But here it comes down to the end of the day. Let me just get this out. Is at the end of the day, I want something that's valuable. And a fucking piece of paper for me, I could wipe my ass with it, but that's about all I'm going to do with it when the apocalyptic or whatever. And I say, I'm just saying, like, if we're out of shit where nobody could fucking get a paper dollar, but they want to buy something and barter or exchange and just go with it. Now, I know a few people in town, fuck it, if it gets to it, you give him a fucking ounce of silver, he'll give you a few gallons of gas.
But what good is the silver to him if he needs the gas himself? That's the point that I'm getting to. Like, it comes to
the silver is a barterability aspect of it.
But it comes to a point where assets.
There's always somebody that needs that silver, though, and there's always somebody that needs the gas. Right?
Yeah, and somebody doesn't need the silver necessarily over the gas.
But there'll be just still both materials are finite amount. You can't print it.
Yeah, but what are you going to do with the silver when there's no more gas?
Buy anything else. Barter trade like I do now. What do I do now? How do I survive day to day now? I do what I can do now, right?
All I'm saying is that in an apocalyptic situation,
and what I mean by that,
basic needs would be worth more than silver, would be worth more than gold. Food would be worth more than gold. Medicine.
But to
medicine.
But you got to understand, there's 6 fucking billion fucking perspectives and personalities and consciousness in this world, in this plane. 6 billion. Not everybody thinks that, some people don't. Some people can go weeks without eating. I know I can. I learned that when I learned how to fast.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's certain things a person can do.
Right.
And that willing, like when we say apocalypse, I just want to make it clear. An apocalypse is a different perspective to each one's current situation. So if a nuclear bomb just happened to go off right now, I'm gonna be like, all right, it'd suck, but it might. It's not hitting me, who cares? Is what I say. But the people in that area now, whoever's been affected in that scenario or whatnot, Well, that's a whole different scenario. That's a whole different scenario if you have gold and silver and you're in the fucking Gaza Strip right now.
I hate to
Everybody's
tell
got
you this,
different
but if
scenarios.
you're in a nuclear area, you know, if you live anywhere near a city, you're gonna get fucking nuked. You're gonna be one of those ones that gets hurt.
Well, yeah, I mean, but going back to, let's just say the power goes out for 3 months, 444. Everybody's got these digital wallets. Everybody pays with the phone. There's no fucking phone service. 3 months of no transactions on computers. The only thing people have is what they have. And the government now at this point, because everybody knows if you have your ear to the ground, the fiat federal monetary money system is gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. And by the feds pulling back and wanting to cut the rates back, they couldn't even make a dent in inflation. And they're already starting to pull back the rates. So what does that tell me? They've given up. The gas pedal is already floored with 35,
You're a
36
doomer?
trillion pieces of paper in debt. And it needs to be wiped out because there's no other way that we're going to wipe it out. We're never going to catch it. It's got to be reset. And the way that they're going to reset it is real monetary value, not just a fucking piece of paper.
So what you're saying is we should all just go crazy and just fucking start looting, right?
No,
that's
what I say to do is
that's what I want to
savvy,
do.
is to be savvy and have enough know-how to understand if you have, listen, if I had $2 million sitting in the bank, that to me is ridiculous. I'd rather have $2 million worth of real estate that I'm sitting on than fucking 2 million paper fucking federal notes in my
that
Bank
makes
of
sense.
America somewhere, because
sense.
I know it's physical. It's there. It's not going anywhere. And so what I mean by using take the paper dollar, so I just look at it this way. Before the federal government system, everything was silver backed, gold backed. You could take your money and go into a bank and you would get the equivalent of the metal. They give it to you right then and there. Just like an old Western cowboy movie. You see the guy flipping a coin, gets it.
Yeah.
That's
And
how it
Omar
works.
might know. He looks like he knows a thing or two about silver. How did you make it from the
aware.
trash can to the manor house?
Oh, well,
With the
I go
fireplace
metal
and
detecting
everything.
a lot. So that's pretty much my hobby. I go metal detecting, looking for gold and
It's a
silver.
little low, but I can maybe.
Have you ever found any grenades?
I found parts of a grenade actually right next to the military base where I detect actually in the field. I think it was a flare grenade though. It was the top part. But it's on my video. I think I have back probably 2 years ago because we have an arsenal down here that Picatinny I think it's called, and they actually make all the earthquakes in the area. Every time there's an earthquake, they're the epicenter. So, yeah.
Where are you from?
I'm up over in New Jersey.
Oh, New Jersey. I thought you were foreign.
No. I just pretend to be Arab Oscar the Grouch.
We live in the age of doomerism. I think I'm one of the lone optimists from the previous era. Y'all could put me in a museum.
So I was in the restroom and refilling my coffee for a moment. What are we discussing right now? I know it has something to do with like nuclear attacks.
Fiat currency.
Well, the thing is, let's just say it happened. Now, what would you rather take? The silver for the gasoline or paper dollars at that point for the gasoline? You're going to take the metal. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Because at that point, the dollar bills are garbage. And if you have trillions of these damn pieces of paper, it's not going to do you good. You might as well stick it in your fireplace.
People don't trust our monetary system because of the fiat thing.
Because the money is not backed by anything worth of value, Jeff. What is our dollar value? What backs this dollar? What makes this piece of fucking paper that has all these different numerical values to them valuable? Nothing. Trust. Belief. That's it. It used to be
I
backed
thought that's
by
how
this
the
note
economy's
is silver
always.
backed by X amount of percentage of
And it has
dollar
like
value.
labor, like the amount of work you put into a dollar.
But it's still just a piece of paper, Jeff. What's the difference between that green note that I give you or a roll of toilet paper at the end of your workday?
Because I could do a lot more with the green note.
But you
Like
won't
if I take a roll of toilet
when-
paper in the grocery
but
store.
you won't when that value is realized across the globe, and America cannot shove it down every other country in the world's throat to make it the number one currency. It's the worst currency to be holding at this point. And if you
What's
look at
a better
countries
one?
like the BRICS, BRIC, the BRICS. If you look at them, they are going to be the next wave of what's going on for the financial conglomerates in the wave of financial savviness, because they're going to have baskets of different commodities in order for you to store your value of what you're worth. Instead of just having, hey, I'm a millionaire only because I have $1 million United States dollars in my bank account. No, it's that you're going to be a millionaire because you have a basket of commodities such as oil, silver, gold, whatever. But you're going to have it. You're going to
I'm
hold
pro-America,
it,
so I want
taste
us
it,
to
touch it,
like
fuck
have
it,
our
do
currency
whatever
on
you
top.
want with it. The pieces of paper is just going to remind that next guy who wants that, whatever he wants to trade with you, he's going to say, what else do you have? Because I don't want to take a suitcase full of
I
dollar
don't think
bills.
we're in that Mad Max world yet, or
No,
even
we're
headed
not,
toward
but
it.
we are there, because if you look at the inflation index, and by the Feds now, just this past couple of weeks, just announced that they're cutting the rates. That means they failed at their inflation tackle. They failed. It's done.
Is that what that means, Joe? Do you think?
Repeat that again, Ken, because I was checking at a message
When the
someone had sent
Fed
me.
signaled last week that they're going to start cutting the rates without successfully completing strangleholding this rise of inflation, it is a signal to me and others that they have failed. And now the metals and physical tangible assets, real estate, is going to start picking up because people are dumping the US dollar now, because it's not worth hardly anything the way it used to be 50 years ago.
The federal government has given up.
I don't think the federal. Are you talking about the federal government or Federal Reserve failed?
I'm talking about your dollar bill from the Federal Reserve.
Okay. Well, I think
Because
in terms
the
of
Federal
like,
Reserve, just for the audience, Joe, the Federal Reserve, ladies and gentlemen, is not the federal government. That's the biggest ruse. And they never tell you that, but they make you think, and they play upon, oh, it's the Federal Reserve, the chairman of the Fed. They're just a bunch of old fucking men who print money out of nothing and charge interest off that nothingness of paper. I'll take a break because I feel myself getting a little hot on those. No, I'm kidding. No, but that's what it is. It's just old men with a big printing machine, where it used to be the government and the U.S. Mint and all these other little mints like Carson City and such, who they fucking wiped them out because they wanted full fucking control of the money. When whoever controls the money controls everything, right? So, but the biggest thing is when the United States told every other fucking country under Richard Nixon that they have to start buying gasoline in United States dollars, or oil, actually, they strong-held the world. The United States did. They bullied. We've always bullied. Not saying we're the only bullies, but we've bullied every other fucking country around this planet to deal with our money current system of this federal note, which we should be ashamed of ourselves. Who are we to tell country X? We'll just call country X. You can only buy oil from the Saudis unless you take your fucking currency and switch it into US currency, and then go to that special bank, OPEC, and switch it, and then buy your barrels of oil. That, to me, is the biggest fucking stronghold criminal act that this country is holding. And the UK is doing it over the rest of the world. All these little fucking, what do they call it? What the Queen has, the Canada.
What country would you want to be in? The BRICS countries?
No, I want to be right here where I'm at.
Oh, okay.
But the BRICS countries, Jeff, are smart because they're starting to realize who is the United States to tell us that we can't buy oil in Fabergé eggs, right? Let's say I got a bunch of Fabergé eggs.
Well, I honestly don't know. Like, I haven't been able to follow you for the last 10 minutes or so, and I need Joe to translate a lot of it for me.
What don't you understand?
A lot of it. So that's why I need Joe.
Why would you need another man to translate what I just said?
Because, Vinny, that's how I process it. So let me do my thing with how I learn.
All right, guys.
I can't just take any one person's word for reality, and Joe knows a lot about this, and he has a way of communicating with me in ways that I understand, so I want to get his perspective. That's what we do here. We get different points of view from a lot of people.
You asked me to come up and talk about silver.
I do. Yes.
Yeah, no.
And I'm glad you did, but I want to get other perspectives as well.
Yeah, no, I pretty much did it. So I'll see you later. I'll see you later.
All right. Take care, Vinny.
All right, so there's kind of two halves to what he was bringing up. The first half being his more direct question about if I had thought the Federal Reserve was failing,
Or had given
evidenced by
up.
the recent rate cut. Yeah, and then there's the broad big picture aspect of it, which isn't necessarily based on whether the Fed had made a rate cut this month or not. Just more his general feeling about that the Federal Reserve exists and the nature of U.S. currency. As far as the rate cut, I don't share the view that um, it's a sign that the Federal Reserve has failed or has given up. They had indicated, and many other scholars had indicated that um, you would not have to wait until inflation reached 2% again before rate cuts started. Cuts could begin and still be high enough to eventually get inflation down to 2% once more, and that you didn't have to wait that long, and that waiting that long could actually pose the risk of um, limiting the economy too much. So I think they're just responding to the data as they saw fit. A 50 basis point cut was more surprising than a 25 basis point cut. That did catch some people off guard. But in general, most of the evidence is indicating that things are going at the pace that the Federal Reserve has wanted them to go since they began the interest rate hikes in 2022. Now, as far as that's sort of just a technical question. As far as like the moral thing behind a lot of it, I am often perplexed when people get angry about fiat currency and feel very strongly about the way things should be. I I personally don't think it makes much of a difference. Um, and as far as essentially creating a fiat currency that's sort of this petrodollar, if it's anchored to anything, it's anchored to um, the price of oil, in global oil markets, but really not backed by anything in the same sense of like gold or silver, which used to be the case for currencies up till the 20th century. A big reason we got off the gold standard was because eventually the population grew to be so much that there just wasn't enough of a gold supply that if people wanted to go in exchange for gold, you could do that at any bank anywhere. Um, it became increasingly impractical to do that. And um, fiat currency has a lot more ability to move around. And if you want to have a business-friendly economy, you need a currency that's easy to move around. Um, and the Fed's policy has been to try and go for 2% because it keeps 2% inflation because it keeps prices relatively stable. Another problem with um, gold currency is that it doesn't really protect against deflation. And in fact, if the currency goes up in value over time, people are less inclined or less incentivized to spend it. They're more inclined to hold on to it. And then what happens then? The currency doesn't move around as well. And so it's harder for business to be done. So 2% is close to zero inflation. And then it's slightly leaning toward inflation so that you always have a little bit incentive to either spend or invest your money now and not sit on it. Because if you spend it or if you put it to work by investing in, let's say, the market, it's contributing to the economy in some sense, rather than just hiding under your mattress in the hopes that it'll be worth more later. And I think if the getting off of the gold standard were going to blow up in our face, we would have seen it happen. Now, there is this separate question of whether the Federal Reserve can keep printing money, and he was talking a lot about that. And maybe I'm sensing maybe that's where a lot of the confusion is of like how that works and why that's bad or how that affects us. I would like to know more about where you feel like there was a gap in your understanding, Jeff, so I could explain it.
I don't know why people are so mistrustful of fiat. Like
Oh,
it's an end of the world conspiracy to them.
so I think, well, if you notice, like Vinny was coming at it from like America bullying people. The Federal Reserve has control. It's a centralized process, and some people that just have that automatic response that when something is centralized,
Yeah.
um, then it's
But that's
it,
going to
it
happen in a state. A state is going to centralize power
yeah.
to
There's
function,
really
and
no reason.
that's never freaked me out because I understand what a
There's really no
state is
reason
and how it
for a
works.
state not to control its currency like that. I agree. Like it's another reason why I see potential trouble with Bitcoin really taking off is because um, I don't know how long it could really be decentralized. Like blockchain technology is decentralized in terms of how the technology works, but I suspect a lot of governments would just pass regulations to try and establish some sort of central control over it. Um, and
What does it mean for a currency to be corrupt instead of the individual themselves?
I mean, you can manipulate exchange rates between your currency and another currencies. Um, here's the fundamental issue with fiat currency is that it has to. It's about the relationship between the Federal Reserve and its monetary policy, and the federal government and its fiscal policy. So fiscal policy is basically whatever the federal budget is. How much do they spend versus how much they make in tax revenue? And if the spending is more than tax revenue, which it has almost always been for several decades now, um, you have to take on debt to cover the rest of it, right? Where does the government get the rest of that? They sell treasury bonds. So when I talked about bonds earlier, a lot of times when you buy treasury bonds, especially newly issued ones, you're basically contributing to that cash shortfall that the government needs to plug up for its spending. So they're raising money from you in order to finance their public budget. And so the way a lot of that gets worked out is what the Federal Reserve will do is, since the federal government is not about to raise taxes to pay down its debt or cut spending to pay down its debt with the same taxes, they simply print more money so that there's more money supply in the system so that the government debt can be paid that way. The government is essentially, the Federal Reserve isn't technically the government. It's like a semi-public, semi-private institution. So the federal government has some control over it, but the member banks, which are private institutions, also have some control on it. So it's a shared institution.
I did a
And
stream to where we went over
yeah,
the Fed and how it works, so that's on there.
so effectively, we have an incentive system in our politics where no politician has any incentive to raise taxes or cut programs to reduce the deficit and make our debt manageable. And so the way that is done, the way our debt is paid on time,
Uh-oh. Did he freeze or
is
did I freeze?
is I still see it, Jeff.
Oh, there was you cut out for a second.
Okay, yeah. So what the Federal Reserve ends up doing is just printing more money because they have the ability to
You
do that.
you're freezing up. I see.
Okay, huh? Let me see if I need to back out for a
Yeah,
moment.
it's causing a we're like losing some words
Okay, let me.
and your video keeps freezing. All right, it was me. My whole connection blinked out.
Okay. Yeah. So um, the Federal Reserve has to increase the money supply in order to pay off all the principal and interest um, from the bonds that are issued to um, cover the government spending deficit. Um, because if we can't raise more money through taxation because nobody wants to pay more taxes, we will get voted out of office if you try to end the deficit and have a balanced budget.
Because voting still works.
Yeah. Then what ends up happening is that in order to come up with the money to pay it off, the Federal Reserve has to print more money, which can devalues the dollar. Um, Historically, it's been done at levels where um, it wasn't too bad, but we had an issue where since the Great Recession, we had done a lot of deficit spending to stimulate the economy, and then when COVID happened, even more stimulus was done that brought it to like just totally different levels, and that suddenly caused hyperinflation. Well, not hyperinflation, but what feels like hyperinflation for us. And so the Federal Reserve responded with the fastest interest rate hikes in recent history. And yeah, so yeah, the freak is right. It's not just printing, but in terms of, because I mean a lot of currency now is digital anyway, so they're not even on a printing press. And so the actual physical money that's out there is less of a case these days. But new money is effectively declared to be in existence, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing, because if demand for the dollar grows at a similar rate of that you expand the money supply, the value of the dollar doesn't change much, right? As an economy grows, more people are going to be using dollars, and so the money supply can grow. But if it grows generally in line with the population and the economy, the actual value of the dollar would remain pretty consistent, because it's not so much as a supply thing as it is a scarcity thing. So you could have more supply, but also more scarcity depending on the context, right? Like if there's more people, you could have more scarcity, even if you have more food than existed in the world, 10,000 years ago, because scarcity is more of a relative thing than an absolute thing. And now some people are just mad because it's bypassing the democratic system. And when you talk about what investing and where you should put your money, I really think you need to decouple whatever your frustrations are about the democratic process and how certain elements of it are bypassed, because it's just a separate question. And I also don't know that it's very helpful to plan your investments for some sort of apocalyptic scenario, because realistically, if we get into that, most of us are going to die, and it's just, you can't effectively prepare for that. It's a necessarily chaotic situation. Even if you have a lot of your assets in silver or gold, it's an open question of whether or not you'd be able to access those. There's just so many curveballs that are going to come from that I don't know that anyone could reasonably say they are prepared for it well. There, I think the people who are most likely to be prepared would be billionaires who have these fancy bunkers on islands or in the mountains with lots of reserves of stuff. But I don't think your average person who is like a prepper is going to be very well prepared for such a calamitous event. And in the meantime, right, what's more likely, I think, is that life just continues, and you invest based on stuff like that. I think if you really are worried about the world ending, talking about opening a brokerage account is not an important question for you. Just
Right.
forget about that, right? It's planning to have kids when you know you're sterile. It just doesn't make sense.
Well,
And
CBDBs, CBGB, CBDCs.
what does that mean?
I don't know.
Okay.
Effigy, he doesn't even know about it. It's the next big thing. And then this fractional reserve banking,
About
whatever that is.
CBDCs?
Central bank digital currencies.
Okay. I'm just looking at some of the comments in the feed. So, I don't really have much of an opinion on the right or wrong of the Federal Reserve. I think, like you said, Jeff, right? A lot of things are democracy, right? They may not be good democracy, right? Hitler becoming the Führer was a result of democracy, right? So democracy made that happen. I'm not going to try and endeavor to determine whether what the Federal Reserve does or why it does what it does is good or bad democracy. I do recognize that there's a lack of accountability with the Federal Reserve. A lot of people who hate the Federal Reserve printing money would also vote their politicians out of office if they raise taxes or cut spending to end the deficit. So people kind of need to pick their poison here. Are you going to just, because the thing about, if the Federal Reserve prints more money, any member of the Senate or the House, none of them can have the finger pointed at them for that, right? Oh, the Federal Reserve did it, right? Right. If you propose a bill to cut spending and or raise taxes to end the deficit, your name is to that. and then fingers can be pointed at you at that, and then ads will be run against you by big donors in elections, and you'll lose, even though you're doing exactly what a lot of those people say they want you to do. The voters just punish people, they punish politicians for things that they often say that they want, but when they actually do them,
Yeah,
they get
part of
thrown
it
out.
is voters communicating what they want, and they're not always good at that.
Yeah, so voters say they want term limits. The same voters keep reelecting their senator and their member of Congress. Right? They could stop voting for them right now. Nothing is. They have privacy in the ballot. Maybe there are a few jurisdictions where they are not run well and they don't have that, but most voters are not going through that. I think what people say, when people say we need term limits, they mean the other party. So
Yeah.
Republican voters say, well, Democratic politicians need term limits. Republican politicians don't. And then when Democrats say it, they're saying, oh, well, Republican politicians need term limits, Democratic politicians don't. And they're just not being honest about what they mean by term limits, right? So there's a lot of like a lot of the things people say are loaded. They're not talking about an even or fair way. They're it's a veiled way of blaming the other side for everything.
And there are some accountability and checks and balances on the Fed, because that episode I did on it, we went over some of those. I don't remember what they are right now, but they
Yeah,
were
like
in there.
the chairman of the Federal Reserve could be sacked. I mean, there are ways for this to happen, and it's just there are layers to it, right? It's less direct than being able to go to the office of your congressman, and but like there's a reason it happens. It's because like if you want to fix the Federal Reserve, I never heard anyone from either side argue
What
for
are we
genuine.
fixing about it? What's broken?
I mean, the thing to fix about it is members of Congress have to be able to propose budgets that either raise taxes or cut spending or both, and not get voted out. But they will get voted out if they do that. That's the
How is
thing.
that a
That's why they
Federal
don't.
Reserve thing?
Because the Federal Reserve effectively, when they are setting policy to deal with inflation, they ultimately correct for that by increasing the money supply, by printing more money, right? So the obligation for the federal government to repay its bonds, its treasury bonds, ultimately gets kicked to the Federal Reserve to figure out,
So
which
they're
it always does.
downstream from where the locus should be in the
Right. So while
process,
the
which is with
Federal
the people.
Reserve does not determine the budget at all, they do have a way of making sure that the bonds get repaid
Well,
by.
what's the solution? Like, is there any politician that's gone in and written these kind of laws and stayed in office? Like, are there success cases of how to keep people doing the right thing in office?
No, I mean it doesn't happen. You cannot run on.
So that means
Um,
that is the will of the people. Then
yeah.
we
So,
as Americans, we as citizens, don't
but I
want
guarantee
our
you,
taxes raised, and we don't want these programs cut. We've drawn a line there. So the backup solution that defaults to is the Federal Reserve, but we are choosing
exactly,
that.
exactly. People are choosing that, and they just don't want to own up to the fact
Right.
that they are
It's
choosing
that
that.
victimhood powerlessness. That's the whole thing I was thinking today here in these stories, is where all of these people are victims of some force outside of their control, and I'm just not
Yeah.
seeing.
Yeah. People are choosing to buy coffee, and they hate that it's bitter. I mean, it makes no sense.
There's a disconnect between personal agency and accountability and the outcomes and results that they experience externally.
Hmm. Exactly. And but again, and then when you talk about like a big central banking system, right? We talked about this yesterday. It's like this ghost story conspiracy theory thing that's really fun, right? Like so
Well, I don't
as
know.
soon
It
as you
sounded
start touching the
traumatic to some people.
well well it's fun to think about, right? It stimulates their mind, right? They can start visualizing it well, and it's just this idea of a sneaky cabal controlling the puppet strings of everything. It just
Yeah, and they're a
it
victim.
animates people's minds.
I
So
guess
what are
I'm
the
more
comments saying
animated
about
by
all this?
reality. If I know there's a chance that something's not real, I'm gonna have less interest in it than if I think it has a chance of being something I could experience.
Mhm. Trying
I
to see
see you
what
might have froze again, or I did.
chat's saying. No, I was just looking at the
They're
chat.
talking about weed or something. and Donald
Okay.
will save us. Trump will save us.
See, animated effigy said term limits are pointless in a functioning democracy. The voters are your term limit. The problem is we need to fix redistricting, not term limits.
But redistricting is something that everyone does and the people are okay with too. So again, that's the will of the people,
uh,
or we'd stop doing it. Some states have. Some states do the third party district. I know
I have
Washington
said to
State
folks,
does.
like, so here in North Carolina, when the Tea Party won, in the 2010 midterms, and then another census happened, and we had to redraw our districts. They used the majority that they had to redraw the districts to heavily favor them, because North Carolina, as you know, is a swing state statewide, so it could heavily go between Democrats and Republicans. So a lot of Democrats are mad that the gerrymandering gives a supermajority to the Republicans in congressional races, in state legislative races, and they're like, we need fair districts. And I'm like, the reason why this works is because you are predictable voters. You will vote for Democrats every time, no matter how bad these candidates are. You will vote for them every time. And gerrymandering only works if you are predictable. And so stop being predictable. Stop being a puppet, right? And like the advantage of gerrymandering disappears overnight if you stop doing that. But like you said, they are choosing to be predictable. They are choosing to look past deeply flawed candidates that their parties nominate just because they have a fundraising advantage. And the same is true for Republicans who complain about gerrymandering in places where Democrats are strong. Stop being predictable, especially when you guys each keep complaining about how deadlocked the system is. But most people just are not willing to go against the grain. They're not willing to say, my voting habits need to change. They want to say everybody else's voting habits needs to change. And again, is that living in
I
accord,
think you've
right? We
just
just go
solved politics.
right. If we go back, like, is that living in accord, right? If we go back to what you first asked me about why I use this name, right? That's not. It's not. It is not the nature of other people to expect that they're all going to change to do exactly what you want. They're not going to do that, right? They don't
No,
give a fuck
I
about
do
you.
that when I was 3 years old. I do that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very childish thing. You go to the teacher, you try to make the teacher enforce what you want, and that's not how real life works. I actually remember that was something that this girl did to me in kindergarten. There's like this girl named Megan who had a crush on me for like 1 week, and she like followed me everywhere and tried to make me play with her. And one time at recess, she actually went to the teacher and like told on me for not letting her play with me and the other boys. And I remember we were playing Batman, and so I derisively called her Poison Ivy because she was coming on to me. And so she went to the teacher. The teacher tried to make me play with her, right? Um, it was shocking. When I look back, I just think, uh, like, wow, if the roles had been reversed, it would have been hugely controversial if the teacher did that. Um, but yeah, like that's the thing. Like I remember that's the thing you could get away with as a kid, right? The teacher tries to be some sort of enforcing peacemaker, but in adult life that doesn't happen. In adult life, you gotta figure out your own problems.
Well,
Um,
our version of adulthood, but I don't think they're getting to be adults now. I think the adults are still in the stage where they have somebody to come in and intervene and make the person play with it. They're still at that kindergarten phase as adults. They've never developed out of it.
so Sean Kelly asked a good question. How can you change voting habits when there's only two parties? There's only two parties because you accept that, right? But here's the issue. It's like for this to change, voters have to be willing to accept that an election will be won by the side that they hate more, right? Like if you want things to change, you have to wait for things to reshape and realign. And in the meantime, um, someone that you really don't like might be in power. You have to make a choice between a long-term result and a short-term result. And most people are not willing to make that short-term compromise. And over the long term, this two-party system that most people don't like just gets more and more entrenched. People keep making compromises, and their power structures develop more. So again, it could change overnight. Nobody makes Democrats vote for Democrats every time, or Republicans vote for Republicans every time. People make a choice to do that, and there are various things that influence that are the levers of power. we'll say, the elites in those parties, but a lot of that could be pulled from under their feet if voters just made decisions for themselves to do something different. But that is the nature of the problem. It is very hard to get a bunch of individuals to take individual responsibility at the same time. You need a bunch of autonomous conclusions to be reached concurrently. That's a lot harder to do than to bully and manipulate people concurrently. And that's why the system is what it is.
We had Effigy in the back try to come on, but I think he's having connection issues.
Okay, he said, I
So
don't
in the
understand this. Like,
meantime,
people
he had
disagree.
the question.
People disagree over tangible policy that affects lives. How do voting habits change that? Well, what they make every election about it is they will focus on like one thing. But the reality is that, like, over time, if you think about what tangible policy offered by the Democrats now compared to 20 years ago, or tangible policy offered by Republicans now compared to 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's a different thing. People feel like they're getting a lot less out of their own parties, but they are not willing to be willing to put the party in a situation where they lose one time if it means improving things long term. And so, it's also very possible that there's no way things get better. Like, it could just be we are down this spiral that will never correct
I
itself.
I still
Or
don't, I
it's
still don't
just a
get this take.
plateau. It's not a
I
spiral.
genuinely don't get this take. Like, number one, I need specifics to understand it better because it sounds extremely vague. Because what I have seen over my adult life has been mostly Republicans running up deficits, basically forcing economic policy onto Democrats because they have to deal with the things that happen after it. Basically that kind of game. So I'm not sure what you mean as far as, like, because there are also things aside from that which are more choice. There are policies that people feel are existential. That party attacks me as an identity, that kind of thing. And whether or not it's true, there are people entire groups who feel that way about things, right? So there's so many different reasons why people vote for different parties. Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around what you are saying, because it seems to me that parties get punished all the time for doing things against what the population that supports them wants. I think the greatest example of that would probably be like George H.W. Bush raising taxes and then him getting losing a lot of support and then losing after his first term. That's a good example of that. There are tons of examples in liberal politics, because liberal politics, as far as policy wise, get very kind of purity oriented when you go into certain areas as well. Same thing with the right when they talk about religious politics. So I'm trying to get what you're saying, because I'm one of those people who kind of like agrees that I think a lot of economic policy tends to almost always bend toward the monetary interests. I think both the people on the right and the left always listen to the money more so than to their own kind of ideology.
Well,
So
I don't want them to be listening to any ideology.
Well, I think that's
So
kind of the idea of the Fed, right? The Fed is not a government institution completely, right? It's mostly private banks. So there is kind of this kind of partnership, and like the stock market. The stock market is an entirely private entity, but we kind of consider these things as part of, our quote unquote economy as a whole. So there is this kind of idea that, like, yeah, we look to politicians to kind of shape economic means, but how are they really the ones driving the wheel sometimes? Because it seems like they have to talk to other people and get them to do other things more so than their policies can actually do. And that's why the Fed exists, right? Because the Fed's, to me, am I wrong? The Fed's main thing is to balance employment and inflation, right? Like, that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
By using monetary policy.
Yeah, that's the mission. Like, you get appointed to the board of governors, and that's basically what they all try to do, right? It's like you play a board game. What are the rules? That's how they're playing the board game. So
Right.
whatever they were doing before that, that's where their mind
and the
is now.
constant balance is trying to keep keep that economy between the two extremes. One extreme is flying off the top and hyperinflating your currency and basically ruining it, and the other extreme is crashing the economy through the floor, mass unemployment, no one has a job, everything falls apart, right? And they're constantly trying to bounce between those two lines and keep it steady in the middle. That's my kind of general understanding.
So you raised a good example with Bush Senior, raising taxes because he thought it made sense, and then getting punished for it. Like he did not get reelected in large part because of that. And but that sort of goes to, I don't know how long you've been in the chat, so I don't know if you caught all my comments on it, but I was making the point that like most voters, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, do not want to accept them paying more taxes or getting a benefits cut or a mixture of both. They will not. When Democrats talk about raising taxes, because they're the only ones who talk about that, they're always talking about it as somebody else is going to pay the tax.
Well, sure.
Your
That's
average
why the two
Democratic,
parties have chosen diametrically opposed positions on those two things. One of them always says cut spending. One of them always says raise taxes. When given those two options, like they've chosen to implant themselves on those two diametrically opposed positions.
Yeah, and but in general, like neither of them want to pay taxes more. Neither of them want to cut. And then the reality of that.
Well, that's the thing. Neither of them hold on those positions at all. At all. If you look, if we want to compare spending, it's a race every single time. I mean, Trump added a fourth of the current national debt. Obama before that, dealing with the financial crisis, had huge spending in those first 4 years. It's almost like a game that doesn't matter, because the spending happens regardless. Like it's almost like that's not even a problem. So while you can paint Democrats as big spenders, it's always just like, well, yeah, okay, we all spend, and the Republicans somehow like we're not. And the Democrats raise taxes, but really only on rich people now, right? Like how often do Democrats ever raise taxes on mid to low income people? So it's only on that one end. So almost it's like the whole game is a shell game. They're not even on the positions that they've taken. They don't. Neither side sticks to it.
Right, and then a big reason why they don't get punished for that is because in a short-term election cycle, right? It's always this like, well, they're much worse, right? That's basically the selling point that each side makes to their base, and so they catastrophize each election. They're like, well, if the Republicans win this one, everything's over. If the Democrats win this one, everything's over. And so a lot of voters, I mean, some don't feel this way about their party, but a lot of voters in their own parties grit their teeth and just vote for a candidate they don't like in a general election, and go with this lesser of two evils attitude. And that's just become more and more the way people look at candidates over the last several election cycles. There's a point some decades ago where people genuinely felt optimistic about a candidate, but that hasn't really been the case on a consistent basis for a long time. Maybe you could say 2008 Obama people actually were feeling hopeful, right? Because he ran on change and hope. But that he's sort of like one lone example.
There was a wave of that. That was probably the last like super positive wave we've had. That's one of the reasons I think Kamala's going to win. Is there's been so much just deep down in the mud hatred on the two sides.
Oh yeah, on both sides.
That even though, no matter what you say about any of her policies, before we even have the policy discussion, if she offers a glimmer of sunlight through the clouds, she's going to win.
I'm not seeing it, but I think people are seeing the sunlight they want to see.
This constant like doomsday crap coming out of Trump, I think. Like regardless,
and the left.
It just sure. People are tired. They're just tired. Can't be the end of the world.
But I don't know why that defaults to Kamala in particular, because I could see Trump being a choice for people who are tired too. So you mean they're tired of Trump?
Yeah, I think.
Even though all the sides are doing it, Trump's getting scapegoated for most of it.
The doomsday talk. How can
I hear that most of the doomsday is from the left, with Trump being a threat to democracy? Like the democracy is under existential threat.
So you think from the candidate of listening to the rhetoric of the two candidates, would you say that Trump or Kamala is offering a positive vision?
I'd say neither one, and I honestly haven't heard much of Kamala's vision because I don't listen to her, so I can't really say what she's offering.
I mean, the fact that they're, you know, one of the easy ones is that she like just smiles more.
Yeah, her, like if you're going off of personality, I don't care for her personality. I think she's whiny. I don't think she shows confidence or leadership. So she's not making the same impression on me subjectively as she might be on you. I don't need a president who smiles. I don't trust her smile anyway. I still think she's going to come after speech and implement more wokeness and all that stuff. So a smile's not going to override any of that for me.
Some people it does.
Right.
Like you can vote for that's another thing. You can vote for any reason. You can vote because one candidate's more attractive than the other. You know, you can do.
I say that all the time.
I like people with blue eyes. Therefore,
You do not have to justify that as your
No.
voice. You
Oh,
do
does that
what
mean
you
I've got
want.
your vote?
There you go. Only green-eyed people should rule.
That would be an interesting system.
Yeah, I see hypocrisy, but I'm not impressed by either side. I see hypocrisy on both sides. I see rhetoric and poor self-awareness on both sides. So, like as a centrist sitting over here looking at both sides, I don't see much difference. Because the same argument that one side makes for some, the other side can make the same argument. So it pretty much balances out.
Okay, I'm trying to catch up on the comments here. Plasma
Yeah, I
Void is
think you're
enjoying the
right,
stream.
Jeremy.
That's good.
I'm prepared to do my own thing for the next 4 years, regardless of who wins. Well, how did you do in the storm?
Oh, my power was only out for like 3 days, so it was relatively mild. It was great. I mean, I wasn't great for some people, but for where I was, it moved last minute toward New Orleans and just kind of split the difference between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and yeah.
So no bed damage or anything.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. You know this. There's a huge difference between being on the west side or the east side of a hurricane. If you're on the east side of a hurricane, you're getting absolutely fucked.
Yeah.
If you are on the west side of a hurricane, it's magnitudes better because of the way the churn happens, the way it turns.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was on the west side of the eye wall. I was like, whoa, literally dodged a bullet.
And you got a break from YouTube on top, a mental health break.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's awesome.
It wasn't even that like super hot afterward. That was the best. Like usually, because some of the worst ones, like when you were out of power for like a month and it's in the middle of August and it's just every day is a sauna. This was relatively nice afterward. The highs only got up to like the upper 80s, which was, I mean, that's cool weather for Southern Louisiana.
Yeah.
But it kind of depowered right before it hit too. So it was really only, even though it hit it as a category 2, it was mostly a 1. So I'm really feeling for the peeps over in Florida and Georgia and the East right now, because it's not fun to get hit by a category 3 or 4.
Jeremy, you tell me is this for Kamala or something else? Freak. I'm not posting that joke.
Oh wow. Okay. Whew. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Is there anything else, or should we wrap up for now?
I don't really have anything else I need to say. I've got the basic first stuff out, and so it'd be interesting to see how people work with
sorry.
it.
The reason I brought up
Uh-huh.
CBDCs earlier, since I wanted to bring that up. Sorry,
Uh-huh.
before we wrapped up. The reason I brought up CBDCs is because a lot of people believe that is going to be like the next kind of filler central bank monetary policy that kind of fixes the idea of this kind of like hyperinflationary kind of post-pandemic world for these things that are going on, or is the next evolution of currency. for those who don't know, they are central bank digital currencies. They are currently being rolled out in different countries. I think it was small countries at first
Ecuador,
right now.
Costa Rica, one of them.
Yeah, Jamaica, Bahamas, and Nigeria have fully rolled them out, but there are a ton of countries who are in testing right now, and they are basically the digital version of your currency, the digital dollar, the digital yen, stuff like that. And the reason there's a big fight brewing between CBDCs and crypto is CBDC's ledger is completely owned by the government. So every transaction by a CBDC is seen 100%, seen and cataloged. So that's why I bring that up as far as like monetary.
That sounds like a
things
good
coming
thing.
out.
The transparency.
Uh-huh.
And would that be different from the current? Like we use our debit card currently instead of cash money. Would it be any different than that? Like, would we notice anything different on our end?
No, it would essentially be the same. Yeah, instead of like debit and credit, it would just be digital versions of that.
Because I hardly ever handle paper money as it is. Mostly when I have
It
to
would
do
be a lot. I
something.
mean, transaction wise, it would. I mean, that's how you get people to roll over to different things. It's how people got to switch to credit cards. It's just a matter of making things convenient for people. I remember when people were super conspiracy about getting the payment chip, and I'll bet you money in a few years that you're going to start seeing people have that little payment chip that has all their like credit card information. They can just swipe their hand and pay their money. It's so easy.
I don't know if I'd go so far as a payment chip. Maybe like something maybe a ring I could wear, but I don't want anything implanted.
Yo, you're giving them ideas now, Jeff. That's a good idea.
They could put something on my fingernail. I could peel off when I need to.
Convenience will always win.
Nothing
But,
permanent.
I'm always curious to see how people think about that because it is coming. There will be a digital dollar.
The mark of the beast.
And I don't know how that affects monetary policy. I don't understand like right now what they do to like, do they just create an entire currency and then, hey, this exists now? Or do they one-to-one it? Do they destroy physical dollars to make up for it? Like, to me, there's so many questions on that end as far as like, yeah. Is it even possible to inflate that currency?
And I have none of the answers and most of the same questions.
But yeah, that's why I brought it up, because just the conversation we were in, talking about how currencies were used and stuff like that, just seems to me like that's going to be the next one.
Are they using digital currencies in Norway?
No, it's safe. Right. It doesn't like this.
Oh, you're cutting out.
I don't know what to do. Is it better now?
Talk a bit.
Is it better now?
A little bit more.
Okay.
Maybe not. I'm not hearing much. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a big part of the problem. We were the last of the outdoor generation. And all video games make me want to do is go outside and do the real thing. So I still have that like spiritual connection to the external world, but I worry that people are losing that. And partly it's because I have the real world experience to base it on. So when I'm watching it in a game, my brain can reference it to the real version. But if they don't have that, and all of their hiking and everything is done in a game, and they don't have any like actual experience of nature, they're not gonna have that. They're not gonna know that. Try Dobes?
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Much
Yeah, I
better,
had
yeah.
to use a worse quality mic, but at least this one actually transmits the data. I had the same issue earlier today. I don't really know why or how, but yeah.
So you were telling us that you said you have no digital currency.
Yeah, we don't really have, like, it's still a physical krone, and of course I don't really use it physically. I only use it on my bank account. But it's still the same as having it in physical print. You know, a krone online is a krone in my hand. It's just that, the one in my hand, not in a savings account, will be hurt more by inflation. But like, it's the same thing. There's no difference, and any other alternatives are heavily regulated and not really appreciated by the state. They do not like crypto. The tax is very high on crypto, at least in my opinion. I think 22% tax on every
That's
single
almost as much as
transaction.
YouTube takes out.
Yeah, I think that's both for buying and selling. Every single step of the way that you do with crypto is 22. That's the same as stock derivatives. Stocks themselves have a 38% tax on sales, I
Jeez.
believe, in addition to a wealth tax.
Dang.
So yeah, the state doesn't really like any of that.
Do y'all have your own Wall Street, and do you call it Wall Street?
No, it's Tollbugata, but it's not really the same. Like, of course, you have the
exchange.
you have it, yeah, but not. There's no fame around it outside of the finance community. So yeah, you have Tollbugata, you have it, but people don't know about it. If you ask a random Norwegian, they would not know that.
Oh,
that's even a thing.
Where's
Of course, they would.
I'll show up in Norway and say, "Where's the Norwegian Wall Street?" Where would they send me? Probably into the ocean. We'll go walk
if
over
you
there.
ask a random guy, that would be the result. Someone that would probably just help you open up your bank and an investment account, and then you can invest in the American market. Okay, maybe not the American, because that's also taxed.
Because don't people buy currencies? Isn't that a thing they?
Yeah, you can do forex trading, but the layman doesn't do that. And I only know of a single guy who does it, and he's not Norwegian. I don't know of any Norwegians who. We should do it though. We should do it. We should
and this the whole reason why crypto is catching on so much. There's so many layers to get into doing that. Whereas I can pop in $50 into my crypto account, send it over to 3 different places, and gamble it up to like an infinite amount, or lose it all in 5 seconds.
That sounds like volatility.
Oh, volatility is probably the perfect word to describe crypto.
You sort of have layers of volatility. You have, normal stocks, decently volatile, but not that much. And, then you have smaller stocks, and then you have stock derivatives, and then you have crypto at like the absolute bottom. There's insane amounts of volatility in it. I've seen a friend of mine, like he was showing me the live view of his crypto account. It went up and down by like hundreds of dollars in a second, and and his account wasn't big. Like, that was gains and losses of like 10-20% every single minute.
I watch slot machines do that in Vegas.
Yeah, like, aside from the little predictability you have, it's basically just gambling. It's like, if you don't know, and if you don't have any feeling for that little sense of predictability, it's basically the same as gambling.
Oh, it's the Wild Wild West, like 100%.
Yeah, it is.
Like, so the way I describe, because look, I've been doing crypto stuff for a long time. During the pandemic, I was really heavy into it, and I made a lot of money off of it. The top maybe 1-2% of crypto coins are world-changing technology. They're amazing stuff. Most of the rest of it is all just Wild Wild West gambling. Crazy scams, video game coins. Like, there's some cool interactivity. I think a lot of people agree that gaming is going to be the place where it gets really mainstream. But yeah, a whole lot of it is crazy stuff.
I think the main usage will probably be basically anything you don't want your state to know about. Because you have the tradespeople, they can't work as much as they want to, so they work black, they work in secret, they take cash, but like, that's cumbersome. I think crypto is just going to be the next tool in how people will avoid the purview of the state, because you can, as long as you don't transfer it into normal cash, and as long as you don't use any software that your state or government can regulate, I mean, it's basically money you can spend and use without them knowing.
The
issue is
gateways are where the only
Yeah.
places, the KYC places where you have to turn your currency into crypto or get crypto into your currency, or
Yeah.
the only places where regulation can happen. But if you can make money by someone paying you crypto and then spend your crypto to get what you need, then there's no point where any kind of regulatory agency can see what you do, essentially, if you're doing it.
they can tax
Yeah.
you. Although
Does
if they
YouTube
find
let
out,
you
they're
take
fucked.
crypto?
I don't
Is-
think so.
I'm not maybe not
Is it?
through
Like
them,
super
but
chats and stuff?
I've seen people drop their wallet addresses all the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Because
if
it's
I
that
drop
easy.
my
You just
wallet
drop your
address,
wallet address
send
and they
me
can just
money.
send you money. Yeah.
No, I think
That's-
there should be a service like Patreon or something where you can pay crypto instead.
Oh, I guarantee you there is somewhere.
Yeah, but the issue is that it's also kind of I don't think I'm giving undue credit to the government when I say that at least you're guaranteed some level of security and safety with it, even if it's regulated to all else. But like if you get the money through cash and a recession isn't like there's no collapse, you're guaranteed you actually have that money. You know, it's yours to spend, and it's functional. But with crypto, I mean, if you're paid in Dogecoin,
Well, there are stable coins in crypto. You can always transfer your Bitcoin
Yeah.
to a USDC or a USDT. I mean, there are thousands of stable coins that are just equivalent to $1 or whatever that never
Aren't-
change value.
but aren't they basically just the same as having them? The only thing you have then is, I guess, the privacy, but it's basically the same as $1 then.
Well, if you've got all this money in crypto and the whole point of it is to constantly gamble
Yeah.
on things, and you feel that the market's about to tank or something like that, and you can just transfer all of your coins from like Bitcoin, or like $1,000 from Bitcoin into this USDC, and
Yeah.
it's going to keep its value. It's like $1. Like, just think of them like stable coins are like a dollar bill. They will never change value. So you can just hold them in that and then wait until you want to reinvest in things.
Yeah. And actually, like Coinbase, the stablecoin service that they have, is essentially like an alternative to like a transaction fee, like an alternative to like using a Visa or a MasterCard.
Yeah.
Is one of their growing business lines. Like I think that's long term going to be more important for Coinbase than the transaction fees they get on like Bitcoin and other crypto speculating through their exchange.
Oh,
It's
okay.
the
So
truth.
apparently I found an
Yeah,
article.
stable coins are where the real money's at for the big players. I mean,
Yeah,
you're
and
essentially becoming a
stablecoin
central bank
is-
yourself.
Yeah, stablecoin is basically functioning. It's providing the function of a currency at that point. And so it's very valuable to the people administering it. And I expect that's probably what's going to help Coinbase and similar businesses. But Coinbase is one of the leaders in that for sure over time.
Well, anything else? I think I'm gonna wind it down. Get a break.
People, if you want to post my X profile again, Jeff,
Yes, let me do
people
that.
can always,
And I have it in the description too, if anybody needs it.
yeah, they can watch what I post, and if people have questions, DMs are open. And if there's one other thing I would highlight that might potentially be of interest to people over time is that I have a pinned post about it. But I am looking to do collaborative analyses on Seeking Alpha through a separate profile from my personal one. And so anyone who feels like they have something to contribute there, they can feel free to reach out about that. And then we can talk about whatever stock or investment we want to discuss and publish together. That's something I'm looking to start doing. I recently created a new collaborative profile called Vagabond Investors for that a couple weeks ago.
Cool. And they
Yeah.
can reach you through Twitter and find
Yeah,
out more
DMs
about
are
it.
open, and if they want to collaborate, they can do that, or if they just have some questions as well. I'm pretty picky on how I use X because I think a lot of drama happens on there, so I don't repost, like, or leave comments. So I mostly will just make my own posts and I'll reply to DMs. But otherwise, I think those are the things that lead to very addictive bad X habits. Is if you start reposting and liking and things like that. So I'm
So
not getting sucked into that.
conscientious.
Yes,
Okay, well, thank you for coming today. I think this is a very valuable conversation. I know I learned a lot.
certainly. And the stream seemed to well the chat seemed to like some of it and probably have more questions. So we can just sort of see um what people's thoughts are moving forward next time we want to do something like this.
Yeah,
And
and I think these like more focused topics are always going to draw a smaller audience anyway, but it'll be an audience with that interest, so we might
yeah,
get better
so
engagement.
yeah, we'll and it'll probably build if we keep at it. So yeah, you definitely let me know what your follow-up thoughts in the
Yeah,
coming
we'll
days
talk.
are as you've digested all this. And then of course, you know, there's other things we didn't talk about today, but just we've kind of been talking about, you know, through private message that we'll continue to discuss as well.
Okay, well, thank you once again, and
Mhm.
enjoy the rest of your day. Do
Yeah, good
something
show.
fun.
Yeah, great
Effigy,
combo.
you got anything?
All I got to say, because it's Saturday in the fall, is go Tigers.
Yeah, school tigers. I could, I could co-sign that. Dobez, how about you? Are you watching a movie tonight?
No,
Oh, you're at home.
yeah, I'm at home.
Well, I
So
hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation, your weekend.
yeah.
Yep. Anything else?
Well, if you're gonna wind down, I don't really want to start any new topics because I know that then I'm gonna go on for like two
I know.
hours.
I'm
I'm
thinking
gonna.
this. It happens all the time. It's the philosophical version of the Southern goodbye. Just tease me with the topic and see where.
Oh, I don't have a specific topic. I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
a general
So
sense that I can
true.
talk about anything. I mean,
Yeah, no. Okay.
so I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut.
I'm so
And
You
guilty
know
of
what?
that.
I feel like there's going to be plenty of opportunity in the future, and it's
oh
always
yeah,
good to have backup topics. So maybe we do save it for another time.
yeah. Oh, actually, yeah. I did send you a link on Discord to a American political
Oh yeah, I'm going to post it. That Utah
yeah,
Utahization.
Utahism. I think it's
Utahism.
actually
Check
from
this
a
out. Not so much for like the realizability of the concept, but the way they analyze the United States and the different cultural regions.
this
Interesting. Like,
guy that's actually from a YouTuber, I believe. It's from a YouTuber who does alternate history, and recently he began analyzing YouTube, no, not YouTube, but like the various American nations and its history and the way the political parties evolved. I believe his name is Monsieur, or I know his name is Monsieur Z. I can send you a
yeah, and they're
link.
finally going to split North Louisiana off of South Louisiana, which are two different cultural environments. That's good.
Yeah.
And New Orleans gets its own little yeah, I
Oh,
like
never
this
mind.
so far.
Wait. I guess I need to post.
Washington's not looking so hot.
Okay, I'm posting here.
Jack Talcott's going to end up in Idaho with Fatty. Scanned
Uh,
America.
oh yeah, there's a lot of restrictions for fishing. But I'm not a big fisher. I've actually only ever fished like in Norway once, and that was on a elementary school trip where we were out rowing and we were fishing, and we somehow managed to get on top of a school of like fish, and so we just got like dozens of fish. I just threw the line in, someone bit, I caught the fish, threw it in again, caught the fish, and like we got so many fish. But generally, no, I only fish in Sweden at my cabin, and there I never get fish. So I don't know the fishing regulations in Norway, and I'm not that familiar with the fishing industry either. Other than that, they are called the salmon barons. Those are the millionaires, salmon barons.
I'm looking at some of this guy's video now. I think I'm gonna go watch some.
Yeah, I really like
I'm
it.
very interested in the cultural anthropology of the U.S.
Yeah, Then just you should also watch the 7 Ages of America. That series is amazing.
What is that? It's a YouTube
It's
series?
yeah, by him. It's his one a
Oh,
YouTube
okay,
series
it's
by
on
him.
his channel.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I will
It's-
check that out too.
yeah. I really recommend this guy. He's basically a more you know about what a voltist. I know you reposted his video on Twitter or something. That guy, Rudyard Lynch, what a voltist.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like him.
Monsieur Z is basically kind of a less occult, a less
Less autistic.
spiritual version.
Oh.
Like they're kind of similar, but like Monsieur Z is more down to earth. Not that that's always in his benefit or negative. I think Rudyard is really great with his more out there content, but Monsieur Z is they're similar-ish. So if you like one, you'd probably like the other one as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I really recommend this guy.
I think I am gonna go look at this. So thanks. I get a movie to watch tonight. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do something. Find something to do with your evening, and I'll be out tomorrow. Have a good
Yeah.
rest of your weekend.
Yeah, and we'll talk some other time then. Well, you're always on, so there's always
much, yeah.
time for me.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. See you, Jeff. Have a good
All
night.
right. Take care. All right, guys. That was our stock talk and open panel. Next time we do it, I think we're gonna pick up with picking the stocks. We have our money loaded up in our brokerage account and the money market thing, and then how do we know what stocks to pick from there? Okay, and like I said, I'll be out later this evening, so we'll do it again, and it'll be an open panel, so show up for that. All right, take care. Have a good rest of your day, and see you then.